Chapter 181. Shin-Haru clearly knew that there was no turning back, but she still wanted to argue. You casually took something that was recorded from who knows where and said that I changed the medicine? Jinwan, you're really good at playing with high technology these days. You can say whatever you want to say. Whatever you want to fabricate, you can. This counts as high technology? Jinwan looked at her in amusement. What era are we in? It's just a surveillance camera. What's so difficult about it? You actually dare to place surveillance cameras in your father's bedroom. You still have the cheek to say that, this is my father's bedroom after all. I won't take pictures of places that shouldn't be taken. Jinwan coldly interrupted her, walked to the table, and took down a tiny surveillance camera from under the lampshade of the lamp placed on the table. Although it only captured the scene on the table, it's enough, isn't it? Any Shin? The evidence was conclusive, and the evidence was closely linked. She did not let go of any opportunity to force Shin-Haru into a dead end. Shin-Haru's gaze was stiff as she stared at the miniature camera in Jinwan's hands. She abruptly turned to Ji Hongwen. Old Ji, listen to my explanation. Ji Hongwen's expression could no longer be described as simple anger and fear. What's there to explain? Is there a need to explain? I really didn't expect that back then. I pitied you and brought you into the Ji family. In the end, you'll personally send me to the gates of hell. You're really good. What a vicious and merciless person. Shin-Haru panicked. Old Ji, the medicine really has nothing to do with me. After all, my face wasn't even captured. How can she be so sure that it's me? Even in court there has to be conclusive evidence. How can she be so sure that it's me just because of this bracelet? The bracelet was given to you by me. Jinwan can't recognize it, but do you think I can't? We've been married for so many years. I can recognize your hand the moment it appeared in the video. Is there a need for Jinwan to confirm it? Ji Hongwen's eyes were filled with coldness. His anger could no longer be appeased. Shin-Haru refused to give up. Ji Hongwen didn't doubt Jinwan's words and didn't want to make a fuss. Now that the truth was in front of him, not only could he lose face, but the fire in his heart was also burning. With a slap, he slapped her again, venting all the fire in his heart on her, slapping her hard and hard. Jinwan tossed the miniature pinhole camera into her pocket and did not say another word. She expressionlessly watched Shin-Haru's disheveled expression. If it didn't concern her father's life, she wouldn't mind continuing to play with Shin-Haru. However, if the matter of these drugs was not exposed, Dad's health would only deteriorate. She had done what she had to do. She wouldn't interfere with how his woman was going to be dealt with. Shin-Haru held onto her swollen face. She turned to see Jinwan standing by the side, watching the fire burn. Because she was too angry and hateful, Shin-Haru gritted her teeth and forced herself to calm down. She then glanced at the enraged Ji Hongwen and lowered her head. She pitifully said in a soft voice, "All right. I admit it. Old Ji, I'll explain everything clearly to you. Actually, the father of the man I married is the current head of the Sheng family. He wanted to borrow my hands to swallow a sum of money from the Ji family. Initially, I didn't know that the medicine was poisonous. They threatened me and forced me to give it to you. Later on, I found out. I didn't change the medicine to clear my name. Instead, I was afraid that you would really eat it and harm your body. That's why I secretly changed it. Firstly, I didn't want you to find out. Secondly, I didn't want the Sheng family to know. Old Ji, I really did it for you. However, I've lived in the Sheng family before. Those people are scheming and I can't win against them. I didn't want to be forced to such a state," she kept explaining, hoping to salvage the situation. However, her gaze landed on Jinwan's side. She discovered that Jinwan seemed to have seen through her expression and was only smiling mildly. Shin-Haru's heart thumped. She did not dare to look at her, afraid that Jinwan would see through her. Ji Hongwen resisted the urge to rip the bracelet off her wrist and smash it. He coldly said, "From today onwards you're not allowed to go anywhere. You can only stay in this room. You're not allowed to answer a single phone call. You're not allowed to interact with the Sheng family or any outsiders. Everything in the Ji family's villa will be handed over to the housekeeper. The matters in the company that have been handed over to you will be handed over to someone else. Don't even think about getting a single cent from the Ji family." Shin-Haru's body abruptly swayed. She took a step back and sat down on the bed. Her eyes trembled as she looked at him. "Old Ji, you can't treat me like this. If you say another word, I'll immediately scram out of the Ji family. Don't blame me for not leaving you with your last bit of face," Ji Hongwen said impatiently. Shin-Haru immediately shut her mouth, not daring to speak any further. Being locked up at home was better than being chased out. As long as she waited for her punishment, there might be a chance for things to turn for the better. If she was chased out just like this, not only would she lose all her face, she might not even have the chance to make a comeback with Ji Hongwon in the future. After enduring for a while, she sat on the edge of the bed quietly, not daring to say another word. 2 days later, Jinwon took the time to visit the hospital. She had originally planned to use the fact that her hand had recovered to visit Dr. Chin and see if he had the time. If he had the time, she would like to treat him to a meal. After all, she had brought him quite a bit of trouble when she asked him to help with the drug analysis. Regardless of how much face Chin Sighting had given Mo Jingshan from her level, she still had to formally thank him. The moment she entered the hospital, she suddenly saw an ambulance stop by the entrance. A person covered in blood was being carried in by the medical staff. Jinwon stood by the hospital entrance. From the corner of her eye, she suddenly saw a figure running out of the ambulance. She never expected it to be Shirnianj. She then saw that Shirnian's hands and clothes were also covered in blood. Her complexion was pale as she followed the medical staff in. When she passed by, Jinwon asked with concern, "Miss Shir? Did something happen?" Shirnian's footsteps paused. She turned to see Jinwon. In her panic, she only nodded politely at Jinwon. She did not say much and continued to run in. The medical staff who followed behind shouted, "Everyone make way, make way. There's a huge car accident ahead. There's an injured person behind. Make way." Jinwon immediately took a step back and saw another person covered in blood being pushed in. Chapter 182. When the medical staff went in, Jinwon walked up to her. "Miss Shir, are you all right? There's so much blood on your body. If you're injured, go and deal with it quickly. Is it your friend or someone else inside? I'll stay and talk to the doctor for you. Go and check your wounds." "I'm fine." Shirnianj turned her eyes and raised her hand to show Jinwon the blood on her hand and body. "I'm not injured. The blood is all theirs. My driver and assistant are injured. They're seriously injured. I'm fine." At this time, many reporters ran in from outside the hospital. While filming the situation in the hospital, they came over to ask, "Excuse me, are you the family or friends of the injured? Can anyone tell us in detail about the heavy car accident on Yuanyang Avenue?" Outside the emergency room, there was a sudden chaos because of the reporter's intrusion. Shirnianj did not speak. Jinwon was about to separate her from the reporters when suddenly, a low male voice came from behind the crowd. "Get out of the way." That voice was unbelievably cold. Jinwon turned her head abruptly and saw Chin Sighting standing there expressionlessly in a white coat. As soon as Chin Sighting appeared, all the medical staff on the first floor of the hospital fell into silence. No one dared to speak loudly. The reporters were stunned. When they turned back to see that it was a doctor who was so rude, they directly raised their cameras to point at him. However, before the reporters could speak, the hospital's security guards had rushed out from behind Chin Sighting and chased the reporters out. As they were chased away, they said sternly, "The emergency room is not a place for reporters to film. Get out quickly. Don't block here and delay the doctor's treatment of the injured. Go." In an instant, the surroundings finally quieted down. Chin Sighting glanced at Jinwon coldly and indifferently, and then, as if inadvertently, his eyes fell on Shirnianj, who was standing behind Jinwon. Seeing Shirnianj standing there with a pale face and not speaking, he walked over. The man's voice was low and cold. "Where are you hurt?" This question was clearly directed at Shirnianj. Shirnianj clearly did not expect that the hospital she was brought to by the ambulance was actually the hospital where Chin Sighting was. She was silent for a moment. There was no obvious expression on her pale face. She only said mildly, "I'm not hurt." When she answered, Shirnianj did not look at Chin Sighting. Her eyes were cold and clear, as cold as Chin Sighting's. Chin Sighting had one hand in the pocket of his white coat. His cold eyes swept over her, and a cold smile appeared on his lips. "That's true. Miss Shir's life has always been tough." At this moment, Shirnianj abruptly turned to look at him and met Chin Sighting's cold gaze. Her gaze was calm and her tone was cold. "Right now, my driver and assistant are seriously injured. Their lives are unknown. Dr. Chin can target me, but please don't add insult to injury at this time." Chin Sighting scoffed coldly before sneering coldly, "I really couldn't tell that Miss Shir actually has a conscience toward the people around you. That conscience of yours that was eaten by a dog has been slowly growing back after all these years in America." Shirnianj did not speak anymore and stared at him. Jinwon did not wish to interfere in other people's emotional matters, but she could not bear to listen any further. She moved closer to Chin Sighting's side and said softly, Dr. Chin, when Miss Sher ran in earlier, she seemed to be limping. She might have hurt the tendons in her leg or injured her ankle. Her complexion is so bad. Although the blood on her body is not hers, she must have been frightened. You're a man. Don't stab her heart at a time like this, okay? At a time like this, he was still rubbing salt on Shernyan's wounds? She really could not tell that this man, who clearly held a scalpel to save lives every day, was actually such a cold-blooded and heartless fellow. Frightened? What does frightened count as? Chin Sighting said coldly and meaningfully, even if a person with a heart of stone was pierced by 1,000 arrows, they would not feel anything. If a few words of mine could stab her heart, she would not be Shernyanj. After finishing his words, he abruptly turned to leave. Although Jin Wan wanted to accompany Miss Sher, who appeared to be in a sorry state both physically and mentally, the two of them were not familiar with each other. Furthermore, the purpose of her visit today was to thank Dr. Chin. After hesitating for a moment, she turned to leave the crowd. Chin Sighting took the lead and entered the elevator. Before the doors closed, Jin Wan rushed in. Chin Sighting glanced at her indifferently. His gaze was cold and indifferent. Clearly he was not in the mood to speak. The elevator ascended slowly. Jin Wan watched the tall and cold man dressed in a white coat and chuckled teasingly. You clearly care about her, yet you insist on acting like you're heartless. You men's hearts can be considered a needle at the bottom of the ocean. Chin Sighting's expression was heavy and he did not speak. Isn't your consultation room on the 16th floor of the hospital? The speed of this hospital's elevator is so slow, and there are often calls from other floors in the middle. You used such a short time to come down from the 16th floor. Clearly you rushed down the stairs in one breath. You rushed to the first floor with the fastest speed possible and saw Miss Sher. After confirming that the one injured in the car accident was not her, you began to act as though you wanted to freeze the other party into ice. What's the point? Chin Sighting coldly glanced at her. Do you women all have so much to say? Jin Wan raised her brows and did not speak further. After all, she did not understand the situation and could not speak further. Isn't your hand already healed? Why did you suddenly come to the hospital? Chin Sighting directly changed the topic, looking at her unhappily. I came to thank you. Previously you helped me bandage up my wound, and the medicine you prescribed for me were all very effective. Also, you helped me analyze my father's medication. Recently, I've really troubled you with many things, so I wanted to properly thank you. Chin Sighting snorted indifferently. There's no need to thank me. If you want to thank someone, go thank your man. Seeing Jin Wan's puzzled gaze, he coldly reprimanded, I've been so busy all day. If it weren't for your man constantly pushing your problems onto my head and urging me to resolve them as soon as possible, those medicines would have been in my drawer until the end of time. Jin Wan? He was really frank and straightforward. Although that's the case, I've troubled you. I originally wanted to treat you to a meal, but since you're so busy, we'll talk about it when you have time. Jin Wan's gaze shifted and she suddenly smiled. When the day comes, Jing Shen and I will treat you. Call Nan Heng and Miss Sher as well. Hearing the three words Miss Sher, Chin Sighting directly snorted coldly. I'm not going. Jin Wan? Chin Sighting's attitude today was as though he had been stung by a bee. He did not give her any face at all, and could not even be bothered to show basic courtesy. Jin Wan also did not continue adding oil to the fire. At night, they returned to the Yew Garden Villa. Auntie Chin said that Mr. Mo had already been back for a while. Jin Wan returned to her room. When she pushed open the bedroom door, she heard the sound of water coming from the bathroom. Chapter 183. Hearing the phone ring, Jin Wan originally did not plan to answer it. She guessed that Mo Jingshan would be done showering soon, so she waited for him to come out and answer it himself. However, the phone kept vibrating. After a while it continued to vibrate. It was already so late. Was there something urgent at the company? Jin Wan glanced at the number displayed. Only then did she realize that it was an international call. The number was from Los Angeles, America. The sound of water continued in the bathroom. Jin Wan stared at the string of numbers for a long time until the phone continued vibrating stubbornly in her hand. She composed herself and picked up the call. Hello, it's not convenient for Jing Shin to pick up the phone right now. If there's anything important, please call back later. She did not hang up immediately after speaking and waited for the other party to respond. However, the other party did not speak. Hello, can you hear me? Jin Wan asked mildly. The other party did not speak. The other party did not speak. Perhaps women were born with an especially sharp sixth sense. Jin Wan's gaze was fixed in the direction of the bathroom. Behind the door, there was fog and the sound of running water. If you're not going to speak, I'll hang up. Jing Xin is currently showering. When he comes out, I'll have him call you back. Jin Wan's tone was mild. Her words seemed unintentional, but they set off a silent ripple in the peaceful night. The phone was abruptly hung up, followed by the ear-piercing busy tone. From start to finish, the person who called did not say a single word. However, Jin Wan could sense that the other party's mood was extremely unhappy. Jin Wan sat on the sofa holding his phone in a daze. The sound of water in the bathroom and the night outside complemented each other. She did not sleep well at the Ji home previously, and sleep quickly swept over her. Just as she was about to fall asleep on the sofa, a cool and wet arm reached over from behind her waist. She shivered abruptly, and the phone slipped out of her grip and fell to the ground. You're done showering? Jin Wan's head naturally leaned against his shoulder. She said sleepily, there was a call for you earlier. I picked it up, but the other party did not speak. Mo Jingxin's hand landed on her waist. In the next second he placed her on the bed. Jin Wan hadn't taken a shower yet. She didn't want to sleep so early, but she was really sleepy. She frowned and finally couldn't help asking, aren't you going to call him back? Mo Jingxin pressed down on her body, who was about to get up. He lifted the blankets and pulled her into his embrace. He kissed her forehead, saying softly, there's no need. He didn't even look at his phone after he came out. In the dead of the night, Jin Wan turned over in her sleep. She was still in Mo Jingxin's arms. She opened her eyes and looked at where his phone was. It seemed like his phone didn't make any more noises. She was really too sleepy. Recently, Jin Wan often felt sleepy. Last night, when she had dinner at the Ji home, she also did not have much of an appetite and felt weak all over. She glanced in that direction again, then closed her eyes again and leaned into the man's embrace to sleep. In the dark night, the room was silent. The next day, when Jin Wan received a call from the police station, she was rushing to the studio. Hello, Miss Ji. This is the Central City Police Station. May I ask if you know Madame Xia Tian? Jin Wan was startled. I do. She's my friend and also a member of our studio. What's wrong? Did something happen to her? Nothing happened to her. She was the one who injured someone and said she was an orphan with no relatives or friends. She refused to cooperate with our investigation. We found Miss Ji's number on her phone. Please make a trip to the police station. Jin Wan was slightly confused. Xia Tian did not want to have any contact with the Xia family in S City. This was not the first time she lied about being an orphan. But Xia Tian had injured him? How was that possible? She had just been discharged from the hospital. Her legs were still weak. How could she have the ability to injure someone? Jin Wan didn't have time to ask. She quickly drove to the police station. When she reached the police station, she quickly walked in. The moment she entered, she saw Xia Tian sitting in the interrogation room by the side door. Her expression was indifferent as she stared at the police officer who was taking down her statement. It seemed like they had been facing each other for a long time. My apologies, Xia Tian is my friend. May I ask what exactly happened? Jin Wan pulled a police officer aside and asked softly. The police officer glanced at Jin Wan and then at Xia Tian, who was still in the interrogation room. As though he had seen something strange, he said, she injured a reporter and smashed his camera. After being brought to the police station, although she didn't resist, she didn't cooperate at all. She said she didn't know anything and even said she didn't have parents and that she was born from a rock. Her mouth is very tight. If I hadn't snatched her phone and found your number, she would most likely be sitting here staring at our police officer until tomorrow morning. Jin Wan? She smiled awkwardly at the police officer and repeatedly apologized. She then entered the interrogation room and nodded apologetically at the police officer. She then moved closer to Xia Tian's side and lowered her voice to ask, didn't you just report to my studio today? Why did you suddenly get beaten up? As soon as Xia Tian saw Jin Wan, she immediately glared at the little policeman outside the door angrily and said unwillingly, this bunch of talkative policemen. If they have any problems they can just come at me. Why did they call you here? What exactly happened? Jin Wan glared at her. Xia Tian rolled her eyes at the light in the interrogation room and said in a low voice, I went to report to your office in the morning, but when I arrived I found someone sneaking around your office for a long time. Then he went downstairs and hid outside Jinlin building. I saw that he had a video camera in his hand and I became suspicious. I went over to snatch the camera from him and flipped through it. I realized that it was full of photos of you. And it wasn't just near your studio. This person seemed to have been secretly following you for a long time. There are many photos of you. Jinwan's brows jumped. Her expression was strange. Why would he take photos of me? Chapter 184. Jinwan suppressed the suspicions she had toward the person who took the photos. Since there's a reason for you to beat someone up, just tell me. Why are you so stubborn and unwilling to give a statement? Xia Tian immediately rolled her eyes at the police officer in the interrogation room. Who says the police are good for the good? I already said my leg was injured, but they still forced me into the police car and took me away. What's worse, they even confiscated my walking stick and said it was a weapon. They said that I was using my leg injury as an excuse to gain sympathy. What kind of police are they? Each and every one of them is like a block of wood and won't listen to what I say. It's obviously the person who took the photos secretly. Why did they lock me up here and interrogate me? The police officer had clearly heard Xia Tian's complaint, but he still said sternly and expressionlessly, Madam Xia, recording a statement doesn't mean a conviction. No matter what the truth is, it's true that you beat someone up. If you don't give a clear statement, the police can only use a more forceful method to execute you. Xia Tian rolled her eyes and turned to whisper in Jinwan's ear so that only she could hear. Earlier on, he was the one who forced me into the police car. Now he wants me to cooperate and give a statement. I won't let him off so easily. Jinwan, big sister, is the point right now to be angry with the police? Feng Ling, who was outside the police station, looked at the situation inside and turned to take her phone to make a call. Mr. Mo, after all, Xia Tian really hurt someone. Right now, not only did she refuse to cooperate with the interrogation, but she was also waiting for the hospital's evaluation. The police station refused to let her go, so Jinwan decided to accompany Xia Tian in the police station. But she never expected Mo Jingshan would suddenly come here. When she saw Mo Jingshan's car, Jinwan stood up in surprise and looked out. Xia Tian completely ignored the oppressive atmosphere in the police station. When she learned that Mo Jingshan would actually lower himself to come to such a place, she immediately smiled at Jinwan with a gossipy expression. Jinwan had just walked out when she heard that the police were cautiously and respectfully explaining the situation to Mo Jingshan. She rushed forward. Mo Jingshan, who was negotiating with the police, saw her and immediately looked in her direction. Jinwan approached him and lowered her voice to say, Xia Tian did this because of me. Did Feng Ling tell you about me at the police station? Mo Jingshan did not reply. He looked at Jinwan's expression and saw that she did not appear to have suffered any grievances in the police station. He then turned his attention to Xia Tian in the interrogation room. His gaze was calm and composed as he held Jinwan's hand, calmly saying, Wait for me in the car. But Xia Tian hasn't. She will be released soon. Since I'm here, don't worry and leave it to me in? Mo Jingshan's eyes were clear. In a place like the police station, Jinwan was indeed not as powerful as Mo Jingshan. She did not say more and returned to the car to wait. When he got on the car, Feng Ling followed him. Jinwan sat in the car and looked at Feng Ling. Did you find out that I was followed and photographed? Feng Ling only hesitated for half a second before answering truthfully, yes. Jinwan calmly glanced at her. Why didn't you tell me in advance? That person has been following you for a long time, but he has been careful to keep his distance. The only things he could capture were photos of Mrs. Mo's daily life and work. There wasn't anything too personal, Feng Ling calmly said. In order to make him give himself away, I intentionally made the security system in front of the studio malfunction so that the other party would lower his guard. I didn't expect that he would be unable to sit still so quickly. Originally, I wanted to take you down today, but I didn't expect Miss Xia Tian to discover it first. I also didn't expect Miss Xia Tian's temper to be so fiery. What's the other party's background? Jinwan's tone did not sound heavy, but her light words carried extra weight. This time, Feng Ling was silent for several seconds and did not directly answer. You can't say? When Jinwan spoke, she acutely sensed that Feng Ling's gaze seemed to be directed toward the police station. She was looking in Mo Jingshan's direction. Feng Ling withdrew her gaze and still did not answer. Jinwan stared at her. Feng Ling, although Mr. Mo is your true employer after all, you've been with me for the longest time. You should understand my character well. Although I'm not too persistent in getting to the bottom of things, nor will I make things difficult for you, I really hope that you can be more honest with me. Feng Ling was quiet for a moment. She watched Jinwan's calm expression and softly said, The other party's background is very simple. He's just an unknown reporter in High City. However, not long ago, his account suddenly received a transfer of 600,000 yuan. The sender is from Los Angeles, America. Speaking up to this point, Feng Ling looked at Jinwan's narrowed eyes. Mrs. Mo, if my guess is correct, the person behind him is the same person who sent the package. Jinwan more or less guessed it. She directly asked, you were once trained in a base in America, and you seem to have quite a good relationship with Nanhang and the rest. So, who exactly is this person, do you know? This time Feng Ling quickly answered, I don't know. The chill in Jinwan's heart gradually rose. She understood Feng Ling's gaze. Although Feng Ling did not speak, she did not overdo it. However, Jinwan could clearly feel that Feng Ling wanted to remind her of something, but she could not say more. After settling the matter at the police station, Jinwan returned to the studio and called Xiaoba over. She had Xiaoba bring her the information on the delivery company in Los Angeles. She had to find that person. She had to find out who exactly it was. In the end, after Jinwan finished her meeting and returned to the office, she heard Xiaoba say, Boss Nguyen, that delivery company actually closed down. Jinwan paused in her movements and raised her eyes to look at her. What? Xiaoba raised the information in her hands for her to see. It's the company you asked me to investigate. Such a large international delivery company suddenly closed down a few days ago. Furthermore, their name has been removed from the American International Delivery Service Center. It's as though they disappeared overnight. Jinwan took out the delivery receipt from the drawer and compared it with it. She then checked it on the computer. Indeed, it was as Xiaoba had said. This international delivery company really did declare bankruptcy in Los Angeles a few days ago. The entire company was sold off in pieces, and the company's name was also removed. It had only been a few days, but an internationally renowned delivery company had completely disappeared just like that. Chapter 185. Just as she was thinking, Feng Ling suddenly entered with a large bouquet of red roses in one hand and an exquisite small bag in the other. After entering, she placed these two items on Jinwan's desk. Jinwan had yet to return to herself. She raised her eyes to see the large bouquet of flowers. What's this? Someone sent it over earlier. They said it's for you. I've checked it and there's nothing wrong with it. Feng Ling looked at her. For me? Jinwan pointed at the roses on the table, her gaze surprised. Feng Ling nodded and did not say more. She turned to leave. Wow. There must be hundreds of them, right? Xiaoba laid on Jinwan's desk with an envious expression. Who sent them? So romantic. Is it a gift from COMO? How would Jinwan know who sent them? It wasn't her birthday, nor was it a special holiday or an anniversary. Besides, she had only found out about the incident at the police station this morning. It had only been a few hours since Mo Jingshan sent her back to the studio. Why would he suddenly send her flowers and gifts? Mo Jingshan was not schizophrenic. Jinwan picked up the large bouquet of flowers in confusion. The delicate roses emitted the unique fragrance of roses. Each one seemed to have been carefully selected. With one glance, she could tell that they were of the highest quality. Not only were they expensive, even the outer packaging looked very girlish. It was made of pink paper. This color, Jinwan could not help but recall the pink gown Sheng Yihan had specially prepared for her. Many years ago, when she was in her teens, she would often follow Ji Hongwen to various events. She would often wear pink, whether it was her gown, shoes, or bag. At that time she was indeed pink at heart. However, as time passed, she gradually lost her preference for such a girlish color. There was no gift card in the bouquet. She could not see the message or name. She casually picked up the exquisite small bag by the side. After opening it, she saw that it was a square gift box. When she opened it again, she saw that it was a white, handmade, luxury watch box. Until she saw that it was Van Cleef and Arpels' latest Pink Lady's watch. When Jinwan saw the design on the watch, her expression immediately turned ugly. There was a card in the box. When she flipped it over, she saw several lines of black handwriting. Van Cleef and Arpels' Lover's Bridge, the most romantic watch in the world. The boy showed the minutes and the girl showed the hours. As the minutes and seconds approached, the boy anxiously counted the minutes, and the girl calmly counted the hours. Finally, when it was close to midnight, they could hug each other for a minute. Good luck, my girl. There was no signature or name on the entire card. But this was Sheng Yihan's handwriting. Jinwan recognized it. A few years ago, she had seen his handwriting in the Ji family. Later, when Xia Tian was hospitalized, she had also seen Sheng Yihan's diagnosis and medical records. What a beautiful watch. Little 8 was surprised, and when he saw the logo, he said with stars in his eyes, "Oh my God! It was actually this brand. Super expensive." Before Xiaoba finished speaking, she was surprised to see Jin Wan casually throw the large bouquet of roses into the wastebasket and then push the box of watches out. You like it? You can have it. 3 drops of sweat rolled down her forehead. This was such an expensive thing. How could she dare to accept it? Jin Wan looked at the watch box on the table and fell silent. A few days ago she had just gone back to expose Shinharu. Today Sheng Yihan suddenly sent her flowers and a gift. What did he mean by this? Was he using this method to greet her from afar? Or was it a declaration of war? Was he reminding her that he was unhappy that she had ruined his plans? Was he deliberately sending her this so-called lover's bridge to keep her at bay? The entire office was filled with the fragrance of roses. Jin Wan was originally not affected by these things. After a while, she abruptly stood up and walked out. She opened the door and called Xiaoba back. Take the flowers out and throw them away. Spray some air freshener in the office. Call me when the smell has dissipated. After speaking, he walked out. Xiaoba was dumbstruck. Even now, she did not know who had sent the flowers and gifts. She also did not know why Jin Wan was not happy at all after receiving these things. Instead, it was as though she had eaten a fly. She did not dare to tarry. She returned to the office and followed Jin Wan's instructions to clean up the flowers. She then put on some air freshener and opened the windows. She turned back to look at the watch box on the table. She felt that this thing was really too expensive. If Boss Nguyen was unhappy and asked her to take care of this thing, she would not know how to deal with it. Thus, she directly placed the watch box into Jin Wan's bag. She then clapped her hands with a relaxed expression and left the office. The result of Xiaoba's actions was that Jin Wan brought the watch home with her without knowing it. When she finally realized it, it was already after her shower. Mo Jingshan came from the bedroom next door. When he saw the bag Jin Wan had thrown by the bedside, he saw a white watch box inside. His deep, cold eyes darkened. He walked over with a cold, handsome face. When he approached, he saw the watch box in the bag. He took it out and saw that it was printed with Van Cleef and Arpels, the symbol of Lover's Bridge. It was a luxury brand owned by a famous French family of jewelry and watches. He took the watch out for a look. The sound of water in the bathroom had stopped. Jin Wan walked out while drying her hair. When she saw him and the watch in his hands, her footsteps paused. She stared at him and then at the watch. Her eyes were filled with obvious surprise. Why was this watch here? Didn't she ask Xiaoba to take care of it in the morning? Why did she bring it back? Jin Wan placed the towel on her head down. She suddenly felt awkward. The man's figure stood by the bedside. His heavy and cold gaze met hers for 3 to 4 seconds. Who gave it to you? Mo Jingshan asked softly. However, it was clear that there was no need for her to answer. He already knew the answer. After all, Feng Ling no longer dared to hide anything about Jin Wan. Jin Wan must have already told him about the gift she received today. Although she did not intentionally bring this watch back, under his gaze, Jin Wan still felt that it was a huge mistake not to open the window and throw the watch out of Jinlin building. Seeing that Mo Jingshan was still staring at her, Jin Wan scratched her hair. Things like receiving gifts are usually one-sided. Furthermore, I didn't intend to bring this thing back. Back then, I wanted to have someone throw it out, but Mo Jingshan calmly cut her off. It's her. Jin Wan. It was Sheng Yihan. Chapter 186. I didn't want to keep it. You can't blame me. My assistant probably saw that the watch was too expensive and didn't dare to throw it away, so he stuffed it into my bag. I didn't notice it before I came back, Jin Wan explained helplessly. Mo Jingshan looked at her for a moment and did not speak. He threw the pink watch into the trash can. Jin Wan did not even look at the watch, thinking that it was fine to throw it away. It suited her. Anyway, she really didn't want to keep Sheng Yihan's things. At this time, Mo Jingshan received a call from the company and turned to enter the study. 10 minutes later, the door to the study was opened again. The man came out expressionlessly and then dug out the watch from the trash can. He held the watch and walked out. What are you doing? Jin Wan asked in confusion. When Jin Wan walked out, she saw that Auntie Chen had brought up a cup of water. Mo Jingshan saw it and casually threw the watch into the cup. Steam rose from the cup. Silently, the time on the watch was fixed at 9:00 p.m. The boy and girl in the watch were at an untouchable distance. From now on, they could no longer approach each other. Auntie Chen held the cup with a surprised expression. She did not understand what was going on. Because Jin Wan's body was cold, she would bring up a cup of water at this time every day. When it was no longer so hot, she would let Jin Wan drink it. She promised to let her drink a cup of warm water every day. But today, Jinwan stood by the door, the corner of her lips twitching. Once and for all. This method was indeed Mo Jingshan's. A watch of this price was not afraid of water or falling, but it was afraid of boiling water. Mr. Mo. Auntie Chin stared at the cup in a daze. This watch. Throw it out. Mo Jingshan's tone was cold. Auntie Chin nodded. Anyway, this cup of water could not be drunk. She took it downstairs quickly and planned to pour another cup and bring it up. Before Mo Jingshan returned to the room, he glanced at Jinwan. What are you looking at? You can't bear to? Jinwan chuckled. After all, it was urgent for her to go to T-City. She could not provoke him at this time. Of course I can bear to. I wanted to throw it out during the day, she said as she followed him back to the room. After closing the door, Mo Jingshan saw that she seemed to have something to say and glanced at her indifferently. Smiling so obsequiously, are you afraid that I won't let you go to T-City? Was there a need to always see through her like this? The corner of Jinwan's mouth twitched. It's indeed about to start. Since you've decided to go, just focus on your studies. Someone will arrange everything else for you. Mo Jingshan's tone was still unfriendly. He had clearly given in to her so-called grand goal and desire, but it was clear that Sheng Yihan's blatant provocation made it difficult for him to soften his tone. Really? Then I have to hand over all the projects in the studio as soon as possible. Several subordinates and assistants in my studio have gone to Xia Tian's place tonight. I'll have a video conference with them tonight and explain it well. Looking at Mo Jingshan's unhappy face, Jinwan stepped forward to hold his arm with a pleading expression. Mo Jingshan coldly glanced at her. Seeing that she did not show any emotions due to Sheng Yihan's matter, he calmly said, "The computer is on. Go." Jinwan glanced at the time. It was almost time for the meeting with Xia Tian and the rest. Seeing that Mo Jingshan was planning to let her off, she did not argue with her. She suddenly smiled and hugged his neck, pulling him down. She forced him to lower his head and planted a kiss on the corner of his lips. After kissing him, she was afraid that he would turn around and throw her onto the bed. She slipped out of his embrace and quickly turned to enter the study. Jinwan sat in front of the computer, having a video conference with Xia Tian and the rest. According to the schedule, they would be leaving for T-City the day after tomorrow. Although the 3 months of study would pass in the blink of an eye, the studio was currently in the development stage. Everything was her blood, sweat, and tears. She had to explain it well. As Mo Jingshan often had video conferences with overseas partners, the video camera on the computer in his study was very high definition. From the screen on Xia Tian's side, Jinwan seemed to be sitting opposite them. During the meeting, Xia Tian held the proposal that Xiaoba handed to her. Don't worry. In the next 3 months, I'll definitely help you secure the #1 sales position in High City's real estate industry. I've seen the land and properties you've acquired and the series of plans you're about to carry out. You really have a good eye. You've already laid these cornerstones. I don't need to exert too much effort. As long as you can safely and steadily hold the current ones in the studio, it will be enough. You have to have confidence in us. Jinwan supported her chin with one hand and looked at them. Of course I have confidence. High City's geographical location is also unique. I'm not in a hurry about sales. Now, the most important thing is the Human Resources Department of the studio. Help me keep a close eye on the people recruited by the Human Resources Department in the future. We don't need too many people, but we must use every one of them. Then they briefly discussed the room for improvement of the studio. Several colleagues who were at Xia Tian's home pointed out the small problems in the studio's operation and other aspects that were easily overlooked. Jinwan also seriously discussed with them how to increase the probability of converting the real estate and the current resources under the studio's name into liquid capital without any loss, and how to be more flexible. After a while, Xia Tian on the screen suddenly looked surprised, and Xiaoba also suddenly looked at Jinwan with a startled expression. Jinwan looked at them in confusion and subconsciously turned back, but she didn't see when Mo Jingshan had entered the study. The man was holding the boiled water that Auntie Chin had brought in. Right now the temperature of the water was just right. He stood there, and the warm light in the study was reflected on the glass in his hand. He didn't seem to want to interrupt her ongoing meeting. However, at this moment the people on the other side of the computer were staring straight at him. Xiaoba suddenly exclaimed, "In my lifetime I've actually seen CO Mo in real life." Jinwan, Chapter 187. That man who only needed to stand there quietly to attract everyone's attention was really the living Mo Jingshan. She had always heard of his name but never seen him. Jinwan was usually low-key and would never specially let Mo Jingshan appear in the studio. At this moment, the people on the other side of the computer were staring at him like wolves and tigers. Mo Jingshan's expression was calm. He walked over, placed the glass by Jinwan's hand, and then glanced at the proposal displayed on her computer screen. You came at the right time. Help me take a look at these places. Jinwan hurriedly pointed at the screen. These are the areas we are considering to develop, but because the previous two companies of the studio have not performed well, many friendly companies are only cooperating with the studio for the sake of MO Corporation. Except for the BGY group a few days ago, the rest are still in the wait-and-see stage, so the concentration and popularity of these projects are not very optimistic. Jinwan nodded and said, "You're right." Speaking up to this point, Jinwan turned to Mo Jingshan. In fact, I can understand. Right now the property market is indeed not very optimistic. Coupled with the studio's previous performance, if it weren't for your intervention, I'm afraid we would be a group of children with no one to care about us. So now we have to go through the invisible obstacles. Xia Tian could not hold it in any longer and suddenly said, "Xiaomo, the one who has to overcome the obstacles step by step is your family's Jinwan, not me. She's so concerned about her face that she has to suffer. There are many things that she is unwilling to ask for your help with. Look, right now we just want you to help us draw a few key points and choose a few projects for us. She can't even ask for such a small request." Xia Tian tapped her fingers on the computer table and ignored Jinwan's glare. She continued to say, "You have to know that in the next few months, this studio will be under my management. My leg is still crippled. Xiaomo, please be kind and give us some advice so that we don't have to take a detour and we can all be at ease. Jinwan can also rest assured. You don't want her to worry about things here every day when she's away to study, do you?" Mo Jingshan did not look at the people on the computer screen. He only indifferently glanced at the little woman who was sitting in front of the computer and drinking water with an awkward expression. He opened his mouth, and there was a hint of gentleness and indulgence in his indifferent tone. "Briefly repeat what you just discussed." Jinwan was about to put down the glass of water she had just taken a sip of, but Xiao Ba, who was sitting opposite her, eagerly took the information in her hand and began to give a brief account. Because she had already given the information, Xiao Ba's words were clear and orderly, and perhaps because the other party was Mo Jingshan, Xiao Ba didn't dare to say any nonsense and spoke concisely. After speaking, Xiao Ba looked up with admiration and said carefully, "Xiaomo, do you need me to show you the details of the plan again?" "Thank you for your hard work. No need," Mo Jingshan calmly said. His gaze had already landed on the page of the plan on Jinwan's computer screen. He bent down and placed his hand on Jinwan's. She was currently holding the mouse and he held her hand and clicked on the mouse several times. He flipped through several pages of the plan and saw the plan inside. A moment later, Mo Jingshan lowered his gaze and watched Jinwan's face illuminated by the computer screen. He looked at her exceptionally serious expression and chuckled softly. His tone was slightly indifferent and filled with indescribable doting. Circle the fifth item on the third page. For the next month, focus on this project. Jinwan immediately flipped the plan back to the page he had mentioned and focused on it. As expected, this piece of land was purchased by me at the end of last month. Right now, High City's Tourism Bureau is planning to develop this area into a tourism development zone. I originally planned to suppress this area for a period of time, but the Tourism Bureau has sent out many people to interfere with the price of the land nearby. Thus, this area should be regulated and can't be suppressed any longer. We should stop while we're ahead. As Mo Jingshan helped her highlight the key points of this project, he marked all the areas that included the predicted price increase. His meaning was clear and also gave her a hint. Is it because you have someone in the city's tourism bureau and know that they will only release the regulation policy in a month, so you want me to suppress it for at most another month? Jinwan asked. Mo Jingshan, yes. It was just a single word. He said it lightly, yet it was as it should be. This was a very simple logic. Even if Jinwan had the ability to predict the future 10 years from now, she could not do everything perfectly. On the other hand, Mo Jingshan's status was different. In this enormous high city, regardless of whether it was the business or political world, he had a certain amount of connections. He could obtain the most direct and accurate plans in advance, and it was many times more effective than her so-called prediction ability. Thus, a man like him was truly terrifying. Not to mention turning back time by 10 years, even if he was thrown into the torrent of history, he would still be able to control everything. He could always look at the entire situation and stand at the top of the pyramid. When Mo Jingshan helped her highlight the key points, He gave her a concise and comprehensive analysis. Jinwan listened attentively. In the study, only their voices could be heard. The video was on the entire time. Xia Tian, Xiaoba, and the others could be described as absolutely quiet. Wasn't the legendary Mo Jingshan aloof, cold, and unreasonable? But right now, the dignified CEO Mo did not pay any attention to anyone on the computer ever since he entered the study. His eyes were only focused on Jinwan, and they were vaguely filled with warmth and patience. Even when Jinwan's thoughts coincided with his, there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. How was this the cold and aloof CEO Mo? He was clearly a top-quality warm man who was like a rare treasure, but it was clear that this treatment was only for Jinwan alone. As for the others, they were not even worthy of his attention. After Mo Jingshan finished highlighting and analyzing the key points, Jinwan simply sat in front of the computer to carefully rearrange the information that had been highlighted. Mo Jingshan rubbed her head twice and did not say anything more, turning to leave. So envious, so blissful, what should I do? I want to fall in love. This is practically a royal level of dog food. As the study door was closed, the computer finally began to resound with voices. Even Xia Tian could not help but click her tongue. Not bad, Jinwan. Sure enough, today is different from the past. Even the dog food of the century has been stuffed into my hands. Jinwan earnestly typed as she said, earlier on, the key points that he mentioned, did you all hear it? I'll edit the documents here and send them to you. Let's continue talking about this. Chapter 188. However, what caused them to break down was that the royal level of dog food did not end here. After a while, Jinwan's meeting had yet to end. Furthermore, it was already late at night, and the main points had already been drawn. The women chatted about the studio while chattering about various unrelated topics. A colleague sitting by Xia Tian's side suddenly teased, "Boss, our studio was invested in by Mo Corporation. When are we going to invite CEO Mo to our studio for an inspection?" That's right. Let's not look at CEO Mo through the screen. The women began to make a fuss again. Even Xia Tian joined in and teased her. Just as Jinwan was trying her best to maintain a stern expression and was about to continue the meeting with a calm expression, the door to the study opened again. Mo Jingshan's voice came from the door. "Do you want to drink milk?" As Mo Jingshan's voice landed, the several heads on the computer screen nodded in unison. Their faces were filled with anticipation as though the person Boss Missouri had asked was them. Jinwan glanced at the water that she had barely drunk earlier. If she did not drink something hot tonight, Mo Jingshan would most likely not let it go. She nodded. A moment later, Mo Jingshan brought her a cup of warm milk. He softly instructed her to drink it while it was hot and to rest early. He then left and did not return. After that, the meeting continued. Every time Jinwan picked up the cup of milk to drink, the several pairs of eyes on the computer screen would stare at her. "I want to drink milk too." "I don't care. I'm going downstairs to buy it right now." Me too. No matter how I try, the milk I buy won't taste as good as the one Boss Missouri personally brings. In order to lose weight, I didn't even eat at night. Now I'm soaking in plain water and milk. I'm about to explode. Envy, jealousy, and hate. I really want to have a man like CEO Mo to kiss, hug, and hold up high every day. Jinwan listened to their nagging and decided to gulp down the milk in the cup. She then placed the cup down heavily and said with a calm and serious expression, "Continue the meeting." Jinwan had lived in High City for many years. Ever since she was young, aside from studying in America for a few years, she had never left High City. When they were about to leave for T-City, Ji Hongwen was busy with trivial matters at the G Corporation and couldn't find time to send Jinwan off. He only sent someone from his family to bring some things for her and called to inform them. When he learned that Mo Jingshan would personally send Jinwan over, he was relieved. It was already winter in High City and everything was frozen. T-City was located in the south, so it was only slightly colder than summer. When he got off the plane, it was already early evening in T-City and it was drizzling. Jinwan wanted to say that she could just take a taxi to T University. After all, Mo Jingshan had been particularly busy these past 2 days. He had compressed his work for the next few days to be completed in the first 2 days. Today was the same. Originally, he had an important meeting at 3 in the afternoon. It had been scheduled for several days, but it just so happened to coincide with the time he was supposed to send Jinwan to T-City. Last night, Mo Jingshan had informed his subordinates and pushed the meeting forward to 10 in the morning. Mo Corporation had several branches in T-City. When Jinwan stepped out of the airport hall, she realized that there was already a car waiting outside. When are you returning to High City? After getting on the car, Jinwan glanced at the time. She did not know how long Mo Jingshan would be accompanying her here. Tomorrow morning at 7. Mo Jingshan responded, speaking softly. I've arranged a place for you near T University. I'll send your luggage there first and accompany you to buy some daily necessities. If there's anything else you need, remember to give Auntie Chin a call and have her send it over. It was already past 8 in the evening. There were less than 11 hours left before they would be parting. His plane was at 7 tomorrow morning, which meant that he had to leave at least 2 hours in advance. Adding in the numbers, there were only a few hours left before they would be parting. Feng Ling will arrive in T-City before noon tomorrow. She'll go directly to your place. He saw that Jinwan kept looking at the time. It was clear that she was reluctant to part with him, but she refused to say it. He pinched her face. Are you sure you want to stay here? Since I'm already here, there's no need for me to think too much. I thought that Feng Ling would have to take a break for the next few months. Actually, I'll be spending most of my time in T University. There's no need for her to come over. Mo Jingshan's expression was calm, but his tone was undeniable. I'm leaving you alone in T-City. From the looks of it, you want to return to High City with me. Jinwan, forget it. With Feng Ling by her side, she could indeed avoid a lot of unnecessary trouble. When did you arrange a place for me? I heard that T University's dormitory environment isn't bad. I originally planned to stay in the dormitory. If you stay in the dormitory, I'm afraid I won't be able to casually warm your bed. Jinwan, who wanted him to warm her bed? She clearly wanted to be a proper student, all right. Jinwan's residence near T University was much better than she had imagined. It was a well-equipped condominium with more than 200 square meters of space. I'm living in such a large house alone, and I'm here to study. The amount of time I can come back to stay is very little. This is too much of a waste. Jinwan walked one round around the condominium. When she came out, she saw that Mo Jingshan had also entered. Even if you can only come back for an hour a week, I can't let my Mrs. Mo suffer. Mo Jingshan pushed the suitcase in his hands. The silver suitcase immediately ran to the wall and stood firmly against it. Even the movement of pushing the suitcase was so handsome. This man, faced with the impending separation, Jinwan suddenly suspected that he was intentionally seducing her. She immediately ran to the kitchen to take a look. Everything had really been prepared for her. Everything that could be used was there. There was basically no need for her to buy too many things. She then opened the fridge. It was already filled with various fresh fruits and ingredients. She took them out to take a look at the date on the packaging. They had all been sent over today. You're returning to High City tomorrow. I'm guessing that I won't be able to eat a meal you personally made for several months. Jinwan suddenly clasped her hands together and looked at him. Her expression was expectant as she said, Do you want to make me another delicious meal tonight? To satisfy my stomach? Mo Jingshan did not even bat an eyelid. He calmly spat out 2 words, Not doing it. Jinwan? What? I'm hungry right now. The man glanced at her with his inky eyes. Jinwan walked over and was about to pull him into the kitchen. She wanted to coax and persuade him to show off his skills once more. Chapter 189. The lights in the room were not turned on, and only a faint moonlight shone through. Jinwan was directly brought in by him and was almost pushed into the bedroom. A new environment, a new bedroom, a new bed. Everything was unfamiliar, causing one to be especially sensitive. She welcomed the man's kiss and her body instantly ignited. Her eyes blurred as she hugged the man on top of her. Her voice trembled as she said, I haven't eaten yet. The man's movements did not stop. He said in a heavy voice, I'll eat first today. With that, Mo Jingshan turned over and covered her body. She let out a low, ah. Because of his movements, she subconsciously closed her legs, but she couldn't stop him at all. His hand traced the extremely sensitive part of her waist. It was slightly itchy and numb to the bone. Jinwan quickly felt something hot and hard pressing against her. She was about to ask him to be gentler when the man suddenly kissed her on the lips. It'll be your birthday in half a month. Go back to High City to celebrate your birthday, I don't know how my classes will progress by then. If there's no time, then don't celebrate your birthday. She had yet to finish speaking when the man actually entered without any warning. Hearing her suppressed low cry, the man's lips curled into a victorious smile. You have to go back. He lowered his voice by her lips, and it was unexpectedly forceful and domineering. Just like the movement of his lower body, she could not avoid it. The first birthday after our marriage, we'll go back to High City to celebrate, remember? What if there's an exam or some other activity, and the professor doesn't let me go back? The classes here are only 3 months long. I think we should not go back. His movements became more ruthless, and each thrust became deeper and harder than the last. Jinwan had already been on the plane for an entire afternoon, and right now she could barely keep up. After being bullied so harshly and heavily, she could not even speak properly. She could only hoarsely whimper. Don't. I'll try my best, all right, good girl? He finally kissed her lips in satisfaction, but the force of his lower body did not lessen. What could be more frustrating than being pressed down on the bed by the great boss Missouri for close to 2 hours, when one was so tired and hungry that they wanted nothing more than to lie down on the bed and sleep through the night? Yet, one still had to get out of bed and go to the nearby supermarket to buy something? Although there were ingredients at home, they were not complete. Thankfully, when they arrived at the supermarket, Mo Jingshan generously allowed her to eat at a Chinese restaurant in front of the entrance. But even if she was full, her entire body had just been devoured by him not long ago. Her legs were still sore when she left the house, and her calves trembled as she walked. If it weren't for the fact that Mo Jingshan's flight was tomorrow morning and he could only accompany her to buy things tonight, she really wanted to bite him to death. She lived near T University, and there were many people in the supermarket near the university. Jinwan pushed the shopping cart, checking to see if there was anything missing. When she raised her eyes, she saw Mo Jingshan standing not far in front of her. He held a heat pack in his hand. His fingers were long and slender, and his skin color was much cleaner than most men's. It was a stark contrast to the red heat pack. He was currently looking at several different brands on the shelves and asking the shop assistant about the differences. Every time Jinwan's period came, her stomach would hurt. She had always had a cold body when she was young, so her stomach would hurt more than most people during those few days of the month. However, she often endured it and did not say anything. She would only drink more hot water to relieve the pain. She did not expect that Mo Jingshan would actually help her choose something like a heat pack from the supermarket. She pushed the shopping cart over and approached him. This man truly possessed all the qualities that attracted others. Most of the girls who passed by were students from the nearby area. When their gazes landed on him, they revealed various kinds of admiration and curiosity. Today, Mo Jingshan did not wear a suit. He did not appear as cold and unapproachable as he usually did in the company. Today he was dressed casually. Although he was low-key and gentle, people like him would always stand out in the crowd. As Jinwan approached, she saw that he was politely asking the shop assistant about the usage of the heat packs. His voice was low and pleasant to the ears. In this ordinary supermarket, he seemed to have put on a different temperament. He was as warm as jade and had an otherworldly aura. Even though Jinwan and he were already very close and had just been intimate on the bed at home, Jinwan still couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. But at this moment she still couldn't tear her eyes away. This man. Yes, it was really beautiful. He had never felt that time pass so quickly. When he returned from the supermarket, it was already late at night. After tidying up the things they bought, Mo Jingshan fulfilled her wish. Although they had a casual dinner outside, he still made her some supper. After eating her fill, Jinwan saw the man sitting on the sofa in the living room. She glanced at the time. There were only 4 hours left before he left for the airport. She leaned over to say, "Let's watch TV together." Mo Jingshan glanced at her. The little woman was clearly tired, but she insisted on not going to sleep. His elegant brows moved as he calmly said, "Come here." Jinwan sat by his side, passing the remote control to him. "What do you want to watch? Financial news or a foreign television station?" "I rarely watch TV. Whatever you like, you can change it yourself." Mo Jingshan held the little woman by his side, caressing her soft, smooth hair. "If you're tired, go to sleep. There's no need to accompany me here." Jinwan glanced at him. In the end, she could not bear to sleep. She sat by his side, switching on the television and changing several channels. As she did so, she asked, "Do you want to watch a variety show?" "Anything is fine." As for what to watch, Mo Jingshan did not have any objections. In the end, the so-called variety show was just a few popular male stars in the country acting coquettishly on stage. They were even better at showing off than women. From time to time they would wink seductively and show off their abs. Jinwan watched with great interest. He casually picked up the remote control and changed the channel. "Watch something else." "Oh." Jinwan was confused. "Then how about watching a movie?" Jinwan switched to a movie channel. In the movie, the male lead was whispering sweet nothings to the female lead. Jinwan's eyes brightened. She suddenly pointed at the handsome face on the screen. This man seems to be a senior who was 2 years older than me when I was studying in America. Back then, I heard that he wanted to be an artist. I didn't expect that he would actually act in a movie. And he's even the main lead. His acting skills aren't bad. He's also much more handsome than before. Mo Jingshan was expressionless. His acting skills are average. Change the channel. Jinwan, she glanced at him. I feel that it's quite good. Not good, change the channel. Chapter 190. Although Jinwan wanted to continue watching, she saw that Mo Jingshan was clearly very dissatisfied with this movie. In the past, he had never been so picky about her taste. However, no matter how she looked at the channel, none of them were good. Her entire mind was focused on the passing time. She felt that every minute and every second was making her heart tighten little by little. Back then, she had shamelessly boasted that it was only 3 months. Now, let alone 3 months, she felt that even waiting for her birthday half a month later was too slow. She did not know what was being shown on the television. She casually switched channels and leaned her head on Mo Jingshan's shoulder. The room was very quiet. The lights were all off, and only the television's light and sound could be heard. After an unknown period of time, the unknown movie had already finished broadcasting. Mo Jingshan shifted his gaze from the television screen to Jinwan's face. He looked at the little woman who had fallen asleep in his arms. Previously, when they were eating supper, Jinwan had mentioned that recently she had been eating and sleeping exceptionally well. If she continued to maintain this state in T-City, she would most likely become a round fatty by the time she returned to High City. She was already so skinny. It was impossible to hope for her to become a round fatty, but being able to eat and sleep was also good. Mo Jingshan gently raised her head, stood up, and carried her up by the waist. He carried her back to the bedroom and placed her on the bed. T-City. Jinwan took the opportunity to visit the professor before the classes began. The professor's surname was Lin. Not only was he very good at teaching business management, he could also be considered an old acquaintance of her father. After greeting Professor Lin, she also learned that all the students accepted by Professor Lin were extraordinary. Most of the students he took in were the heirs of Chinese companies in China and abroad, or the senior managers of some famous groups. Because everyone did not have much time, they could only squeeze their time into these few months. The schedule for classes and exams was very tight. To save time, the professor suggested that Jinwan stay in school as much as possible. T University had a special VIP dormitory. After Mo Jingshan returned to High City, Jinwan stayed alone in such a large condominium. Although she did not lack anything, whenever she slept, she would always think of the night Mo Jingshan stayed here. In the end, she still chose to move to the school dormitory. The business department's VIP dormitory was on the 6th floor. It was separated from the normal students' dormitory and had plenty of sunlight. However, it was still a school environment. No matter what, resources were limited, and the best was a 4-person dormitory. When Jinwan pushed open the door and entered, she saw a girl around her age sitting on the bed talking on the phone. All kinds of branded products, cell phones, and computers were thrown on the bed. She was focused on talking on the phone and did not tidy up anything. It was clear that she was a pampered young lady. Jinwan had left most of her things in the condominium. She only brought the smallest suitcase with her. She only brought a simple introduction and could bring it back to the condominium to retrieve it. She could use to bring it back anytime. She had just sat down by her bed when another person walked in. This person was around 25 or 26 years old. She was dressed fashionably and appeared slightly mature. Her actions were straightforward and efficient. After entering the room, she greeted Jinwan and the person inside and introduced herself. She said that she was the vice president of Hengyun Corporation and that her name was Bai Wei. She had come here to further her studies. After a simple self-introduction, she carried her luggage to her bed and began to pack. She did not say a single word of nonsense. The girl on the phone put down the phone after another 10 minutes. She looked at the two of them and realized that her bed was really messy. She then began to tidy it up lazily. She placed a bunch of expensive cosmetics and skincare products on the public table. They were all international brands, and even the cheapest one was from Aquamarine Mystery, which cost more than 2,000 yuan. Hey, how did you guys clean up so quickly? The girl tidied up her makeup and looked at their clean bed and table enviously. Jinwan glanced at her small suitcase. I don't have many things. The girl glanced at Jinwan and raised her brows. She then turned to look at Bai Wei on the other bed. Seeing that the skincare products Bai Wei had brought out were not cheap, she directly asked, "Your body smells so good. Aya, you're using the C family's latest perfume from last month, right? And it was the limited edition one. I went to France and asked people to queue for a long time, but they couldn't buy it. You actually have it?" Bai Wei glanced at her and casually responded before continuing to tidy up. It was clear that she was not in the mood to talk too much with this kind of noisy rich young lady. Seeing that she was ignoring her, the girl could only turn to look at Jin Wan. "Why did you bring so few things?" "That's right, earlier she said her name was Bai Wei? Which company's vice president is she from?" Bai Wei casually replied, "Hengyun Corporation." "Oh, that's right, Hengyun Corporation. I've heard of this company before. It's the largest technology company in T-City. I think it's been listed for a long time, hasn't it?" The girl then said, "My father is the chairman of the Ling Group Bank. 50% of the Ling Group Bank's shares in the country belong to my family. I'm Ling Feifei." As she spoke, Ling Feifei turned to look at Jin Wan. "What about you?" Jin Wan was silent for a moment before replying, "I'm in charge of a real estate studio in High City." Jin Wan. The moment Ling Feifei heard this, she immediately lost interest in Jin Wan's gaze. She casually asked, "Studio? That investment shouldn't be much, right?" She was just short of saying how a small character like Jin Wan, who could not even be seen in public, could be accepted as Professor Lin's student. "But since you're from High City, do you know of the MO Corporation?" Ling Feifei did not have much interest in Jin Wan, whose identity could not be seen in public. However, it was clear that she had an indescribable yearning for the MO Corporation. As she spoke these words, her eyes shone. But then again, who in High City doesn't know of the MO Corporation? Ling Feifei sat there and said, "I'm sure you've only heard of it. It's such a pity. It's so rare to meet someone from High City, but it's actually from a small studio." Jin Wan. Ling Feifei realized that she had spoken too quickly. She suddenly smiled awkwardly at Jin Wan. What I meant was, a company like the MO Corporation usually wouldn't cooperate with a small studio like this. I was just saying. Please don't take it to heart." Jin Wan's brows moved slightly as she smiled. "I don't mind." Chapter 191. I usually only use a bottle of water. Jin Wan pointed at the small items she had placed by her pillow. Among them was a light green glass bottle. Ling Feifei glanced at it but could not recognize the brand. "What brand is this? How much is it?" "I forgot. I think it's around 600 yuan. Ling Feifei was shocked. "Only 600 yuan? Ling Feifei glanced at the moisturizer in her hands that was worth more than 10,000 yuan. Suddenly she did not wish to speak to Jin Wan anymore. Bai Wei, who had not interjected earlier, suddenly spoke up. "I often use Jin Wan's moisturizer as well. People with especially good skin usually only use this." Ling Feifei pursed her lips and did not speak. However, it was clear that she was already extremely unhappy that Professor Lin had arranged for her to share a dormitory with someone without status and money. She was just holding it in. Jin Wan could see the disdain in this young lady's expression. She did not speak and only smiled at Bai Wei. Professor Lin had said that the majority of the students this time were young masters and young ladies with good family backgrounds and had their eyes set on the top of their heads. Furthermore, the class would only last for a short 3 months. Before they could understand each other, it would end. Thus, there was no need for her to reveal her trump card. Ling Feifei's luggage was truly too much. She could not fit all of it in her room, so she placed the other suitcase on the empty bed by the side. "There should only be 3 people in this dormitory, right?" Ling Feifei asked as she placed it. She had yet to finish her words when the door to the dormitory opened once more. Another young girl entered. The girl was dressed in a white dress. After entering, she glanced inside. Her gaze finally landed on Jin Wan, who was closest to the door. "Hello, I'm sorry I'm late. There should still be a place for me in the dormitory, right?" Bai Wei and Jin Wan simultaneously glanced toward the bed occupied by Ling Feifei's luggage. Ling Feifei's expression was clearly unhappy. However, under the gazes of the 3 of them, she could only place the luggage down and turn to return to her own bed. The girl who had just come in walked up to the bed and looked at Jin Wan, who was looking at her cell phone in the next bed. "Hello, my name is Su Shui. In the next 3 months we'll sleep next to each other like this. Let's make friends." Jin Wan raised her eyes from her phone and glanced at Su Shui on the bed next door. Seeing that she was smiling brightly, Jin Wan nodded. This Su Shui seemed to be about the same age as Jin Wan, but she had an innocent and naive look, which easily made people let down their guard. Classes would officially start tomorrow, and the 4 people in the dormitory were all present. It was inevitable that they would have to introduce themselves again. Su Shui seemed to like talking to Jinwan very much. Just now, she sat on Jinwan's bed and exchanged phone numbers with her. When it was Su Shui's turn to introduce herself, she smiled and said, "I'm from Los Angeles in America. My family has all kinds of businesses, and one of the more famous ones is a Chinese company in Los Angeles, Swan Group. My father holds 60% of the shares." Hearing the word Swan Group, the arrogant Ling Feifei suddenly took several glances at Su Shui. Her arrogant expression changed, as though she had finally found a roommate who was worthy of living in the same dormitory as her. "You're actually from America. Aren't there many outstanding lecturers overseas? Why did you come to our country to study business management?" Su Shui smiled. "After all, my family is a Chinese company. I still need to understand the local culture. My family has some relatives in T-City. They suggested that I come here, so I came." After that, they chatted for a while. Jinwan would occasionally reply, but because Jinwan's identity was too ordinary, Ling Feifei, that chatterbox, spent the entire time currying favor with Su Shui, and by way. She ignored Jinwan and would occasionally ask a question, but it was clear that she was not interested in her. Jinwan was also happy to be left alone. Not long later, Feng Ling gave Jinwan a call and asked her if she wanted to eat dinner in T University or go out. The dormitory was filled with Ling Feifei's fervent chatter. It was too noisy, so she naturally chose to go out. Jinwan had just left the dormitory when Su Shui followed her out. "Jinwan, it's already dark. Where are you going?" Jinwan glanced at her. "I'll be back after eating dinner. Do you have something to do?" Hearing this, Su Shui moved closer to her side and held her arm, speaking intimately, "Then let's go eat together. This is our first time in T-City and we're unfamiliar with this place. It's good to have companions." Jinwan's lips curved, her smile was mild. It was not that she was cold, but Su Shui's sudden familiarity made her feel that something was amiss. "We'll eat together another day. I have an appointment with a friend tonight." "All right then. Let's go together tomorrow?" Su Shui followed her persistently. "We'll talk about it tomorrow." Before Jinwan stepped out of the dormitory, she saw that Su Shui was still looking at her. She turned to look at her again, asking, "Earlier on, you said that you came from Los Angeles?" Su Shui smiled and nodded. "That's right." Jinwan smiled deeply and said meaningfully, "Not bad. It's really a city that makes one yearn to go to." Su Shui's expression was startled for a moment. "Yearn? You've never been to Los Angeles?" Jinwan watched her expression without batting an eyelid. She raised her brows slightly. "What? Should I have been there?" "No, I'm just surprised. Earlier on, I heard Feifei and the others mention that they had all gone to Los Angeles for a vacation. I thought you had been there too." Su Shui stared at her eyes for a moment before her sweet and harmless smile returned. Jinwan smiled and glanced at the time. "I'm sorry, my friend is still waiting for me." Su Shui could only nod. Just as Jinwan was about to leave, she suddenly asked, "It's already so late and you're still going to eat dinner. You're leaving in such a hurry. Could the person waiting for you be your boyfriend?" Jinwan did not reply. She raised her brows and looked at her with a slight smile. "What do you want to eat? Do you want me to pack it for you?" Su Shui's expression faltered. She then smiled and answered, "A portion of spaghetti. Thank you." After leaving T University, Feng Ling had been waiting for Jinwan for a long time. The two of them casually ate at a Western restaurant near T University. Jinwan cut the steak and glanced at Feng Ling, who was quietly eating her steak. "I want to ask you a few questions." "What?" "Have you heard of Los Angeles's Swan Group?" "Yes." Jinwan's hands, which were holding onto the knife and fork, paused. "Then is there any special relationship between Swan Group and Shine Group? Or is there any relationship between her and Mo Jingshan?" Chapter 192. "It doesn't matter," Feng Ling replied, looking into Jinwan's eyes. Their eyes met and she was as honest as ever. Jinwan paused. It didn't matter? If this was a question Feng Ling could not answer, Feng Ling would say that she did not know or remain silent. However, she directly said that it didn't matter. Based on Jinwan's understanding of Feng Ling, she was certain that she was speaking the truth. Could it be that she was thinking too much? "Then have you heard of the name Su Shui?" Jinwan asked. When Feng Ling heard the word, Su, there was a moment of surprise in her eyes. However, when she heard the name behind it, she immediately shook her head. "No. All right, there's nothing else. Let's continue eating. Jinwan did not speak further. Jinwan was thinking that this Su Shui was indeed a naive person who liked to be friends with anyone she met. Or, Su Shui's real name was not these 3 words, and she had lied about her family background. However, these were all just conjectures. It seemed like she had to find time to take a photo with Su Shui in the next few days. She would bring the photo to Feng Ling to take a look. Perhaps she might be able to find some answers. On the first day of classes, everything was in order. Professor Lin was indeed an experienced professor. His teaching style was also very suitable for young people. There were more than 40 students in this new class, both male and female. More than half of the students were female, and there weren't many male students. However, most of them were second-generation heirs and heirs of wealthy families. All of them were wealthy and respectable, and they couldn't be underestimated in the future. In the evening after class, Jinwan took her books and returned to the dormitory to revise. She had left all the work in the studio to Xia Tian before taking the time to come to T University. These 3 months were very precious to her. You're so hard-working? It's only the first day. Everyone has gone to the entertainment club opposite T University. Aren't you going out for a drink or two? When Bai Wei returned, she saw that Jinwan was actually revising. Bai Wei was different from those pampered daughters of wealthy families. She was a senior executive in a company, and her words were very mature and straightforward. She did not like to be too close to Ling Feifei, but her impression of Jinwan was quite good. She would occasionally chat with Jinwan. I want to, but I can't. There's someone at home who doesn't allow me to drink. Jinwan smiled at Bai Wei. She flipped through the book in her hands and furiously took notes. Not even wine? Why are you so strict? Bai Wei said casually. In the blink of an eye, she picked up a book and sat on the bed opposite and began to read. Jinwan did not answer but raised her eyes to glance at her. Why don't you go? I'm not interested in participating in this kind of activity. They're just a bunch of pampered second-generation rich kids. There's no point in getting along with them, Bai Wei replied and did not say anything else. She lowered her head and continued reading. The dormitory was quiet except for the occasional sound of flipping pages. Jinwan continued writing for a while. When she put down her pen to rest, she glanced at her phone on the table. She had no idea what the man who warned her not to touch a drop of alcohol was doing right now. She thought for a moment, suddenly picked up her phone, took a photo of the notes she had just written and sent it to him. Hi City, MO Corporation. The black ghost came out of the company's underground parking lot and drove to the square in front. The sound of an incoming message came from his cell phone. Mo Jingshan usually ignored these messages, but at this moment he took out his cell phone and glanced at it. Seeing that it was a message from Jinwan, the black ghost drove to a spot with less traffic and stopped by the side of the road. He opened the message and saw that it was a basic business management class notebook. The neat and serious handwriting displayed the little woman's seriousness and diligence. His cell phone then rang again. The second message came in. Jinwan, the first day of class. The first set of notes. Mr. Mo, please check. Mo Jingshan's eyes were filled with warmth as he called her. Jinwan did not know if he was busy and did not dare to call. She was leaning against the table, preparing to send another message when the man's call came in. She was startled. She turned back to see that Bai Wei was still reading. Afraid that the call would disturb her, she rushed to grab her phone and ran out of the dormitory like a thief. Class is over? The man's calm and clear voice came from the phone. Although his tone was clearly no different from his usual tone, Jinwan's heart was like the surging undercurrents of a calm lake. His simple words had caused her emotions to rise and fall. She only needed a moment of distraction to wish that she could immediately fly back to High City. She softly responded. What is it? Why are you so depressed? Are you unhappy? No. Why didn't you wake me up when you went to the airport that day? When I suddenly woke up in the morning, it was already past 8 o'clock. The moment I opened my eyes, I saw that the room was empty. At that time he was already on the plane. She could not call him. After the feeling of disappointment in her heart gradually calmed down, she held her breath. She was angry that he left without saying a word. Why did I wake you up? Tell you to hug me and cry? Jinwan? Who said I would cry? The man's voice was cold. He smiled faintly. You don't need to cry. Just one look is enough to make me suffer. I'm afraid I'll regret it on the spot and directly kidnap you back to High City. Since Mo Jingshan could say these words, it proved that he was definitely capable of doing such a thing. However, at that time if Jinwan had watched him leave, she most likely would not have looked too happy. From time to time, students from other dormitories would pass by the corridor. Jinwan lowered her voice and briefly explained the classes here to Emo Jingshin. As she spoke, she suddenly heard the sound of a car on the other end of the line. She asked, "Are you driving?" "No, the car is parked by the side of the road." Emo Jingshin calmly said, "I'm afraid I'll be distracted if I call Mrs. Emo, so I parked the car early." "I thought you were at the company or at home?" Jinwan finally realized that he had just gotten off work. From the sound of the car, she could guess that there was a traffic jam. If he continued to park there, it would be really inconvenient. She said, "You drive back first. I'll continue to take notes. I'll call later." Clearly, it wasn't good to keep the car parked there. He did not reject her. His voice was clear and low. "Don't read for too long. Take care of your eyes. Also, don't stay up late." I know. Don't worry. Even if you're not by my side to urge me, my lifestyle is still orderly. I'll definitely study well and live a healthy life." Jinwan mischievously responded and hung up. She put down the phone and was about to return to the dormitory when she saw that Su Shui had returned. She was standing at the staircase in front of the corridor, looking in her direction thoughtfully. Chapter 193. Meeting Su Shui's gaze, Jinwan withdrew the smile on her face and placed her phone in her pocket. She calmly glanced at her. "You didn't go with them to the club to play?" "I did, but I came back because there was nothing interesting." Su Shui finally raised an exquisite box in her hands. "Earlier, I bought a lot of desserts outside T University. Let's eat together." Jinwan nodded and entered the dormitory. Without Ling Feifei, the dormitory was much quieter. Su Shui opened the dessert box and distributed the desserts to them. She then naturally sat by Jinwan's bedside and ate the mousse cake in her hands as she tried to find topics to chat with Jinwan. Most of the topics revolved around Jinwan. One moment, she asked Jinwan why she opened a studio related to real estate. The next moment, she asked Jinwan what her family did aside from opening a studio. The next moment, she asked Jinwan why she wanted to study business management. Finally, she casually asked, "Jinwan, who were you talking to on the phone earlier? You were smiling so brightly. The person on the other side of the phone definitely wasn't your parents. It must be your boyfriend or something, right?" Jinwan continued to hold the unfinished notes in her hands. As she read, she calmly said, "After asking so many questions, are you more curious about me or my so-called boyfriend?" As she spoke, Jinwan's gaze shifted to Su Shui's face. Jinwan's face carried a smile, but it also carried an unfathomable sense of distance. Su Shui blinked. "Since there's nothing to do, I'm just casually chatting. I have a cousin whom I've been close to since I was young. She's the same age as you. Perhaps it's because of this that I instinctively feel closer to you." Jinwan raised her brows. "Cousin?" Su Shui nodded but did not continue on the topic of her so-called cousin. She only said, "Also look, we've all introduced ourselves. Ling Feifei couldn't hide anything, and Bai Wei's company can be easily found online. You're the only one who said that you opened a studio in High City and didn't say anything else. I'm indeed very curious about you." Hearing these words, Bai Wei finally glanced at Jinwan. "I indeed only have a studio. My background is simple and clean. There's nothing to be curious about." Jinwan's tone was indifferent. She then glanced at Su Shui. "Speaking of which, aren't you, the young lady of the Swan Group who specially came from America, more worthy of my curiosity?" Su Shui immediately smiled bashfully. "I'm not that different from you guys. I just live a little further." "Only?" Jinwan raised her brows. "It seems like we're all the same. I live a little further." "Jinwan, I just want to get to know you better. I don't have many friends in the country, so I ask too many questions. Don't always keep me at a distance." Jinwan did not speak. Bai Wei suddenly spoke up, "Everyone's personality is different. Jinwan clearly doesn't wish to say more, yet you keep asking. Why can't you see this clearly?" Su Shui's expression faltered. She thought for a moment and suddenly handed a few desserts to Jinwan. "All right, I won't ask any more. I'll go read too." She stood up and returned to her own bed. Jinwan glanced at the desserts Su Shui placed by her bed. She casually picked them up and handed them to Bai Wei. "You eat them. Recently, I've lost interest in desserts. My stomach feels uncomfortable after just a few mouthfuls. I keep feeling nauseous." Bai Wei glanced at her and teased, "What's there to feel nauseous about? Don't tell me you're pregnant?" They didn't know each other very well, so her casual words were just a joke. Jinwan just smiled at it. Su Shui's gaze abruptly shifted to Jin Wan. Sensing her gaze, Jin Wan could not help but turn to look at her. Don't you want to read? Su Shui paused. Her gaze shifted to her stomach. She picked up the book and asked thoughtfully, do you feel nauseous when you eat desserts? I'm joking. Jin Wan curved her lips and did not pay her any more attention. Half a month passed by quickly. Jin Wan had almost forgotten about her birthday. By the time she remembered, it was T University's annual bonfire party. The bonfire party was the day before her birthday. It was also the day Jin Wan had originally planned to book a plane ticket back to High City. It was said that not all students had the right to attend. Only students who had been selected by the professors and the school officials could attend the celebration. Jin Wan was preparing to book a plane ticket back to High City when she suddenly received a call from Professor Lin. Professor Lin said that among the new students under him, there were only 10 spots left for the bonfire party. One of them was her. He also said that this spot was difficult to obtain. Once it was confirmed, it could not be changed. Jin Wan could only agree. But this way she would not be able to return to High City on her birthday. She had originally promised Mo Jingshan, but now that she had changed her mind, she did not know if he would be angered by her. Jin Wan held her phone in a daze for a moment before calling Mo Jingshan. Mo Jingshan picked up the call and heard the woman stammering on the other end. What are you feeling so guilty about? Can't you even have a proper conversation? Jin Wan could only speak honestly. Earlier, I received a call from Professor Lin. He arranged a spot for me for T University's annual bonfire party. Since I've already arranged it, I can't go. So, I can't return to High City on Saturday. You're not returning to High City this week? Mo Jingshan was in his office, flipping through the documents without raising his head. He spoke calmly into his phone. Even if Professor Lin treats you as his favorite student, you can't snatch me away so blatantly. Do you plan on spending your 21st birthday with me in a house far apart from each other? It's not that. She actually wanted to go back. After so long, this was the first time she had been apart from Mo Jingshan for such a long time. She had long gotten used to working during the day and returning home at night to hug the other party. Now that they were forcibly separated, time had really slowed down. Mo Jingshan placed the documents in his hands down and loosened his collar. After a moment of silence he asked, "What bonfire party? Can't you be absent?" "The spots are limited. Professor Lin specially reserved a spot for me, and it's really hard to refuse. Once it's decided, it can't be changed. I'm thinking that if it really can't be done, I'll celebrate my birthday on the lunar calendar. I won't celebrate my birthday on the solar calendar. I'll go back next month." Professor Lin had given her so much face. She couldn't possibly reject his good intentions. "Do we need to dress up for your bonfire party?" "There's no need. It's not like it's a banquet." Although Professor Lin's students are all from the upper class, there are many ordinary students in T University. This isn't the school's anniversary. It shouldn't be that grand. The entire student body of T University will be there. More or less, but there should be a limited number of spots. In total, there should only be a few hundred people. "A few hundred?" The man suddenly said coldly. "There are only a dozen or so hedonistic young masters in Professor Lin's class. I've already endured enough to let them stay in the same classroom as you. Are you going to attend the bonfire party with a few hundred people?" Chapter 194. On Saturday, the bonfire party started at 6:00 p.m. It was held by the river not far from T University. This river ran through T City, and the wind was chilly at night. It rustled against the lush trees on both sides of the river. Coincidentally, the 4 people from her dormitory were all on the list. Jin Wan was still dressed in her usual clothes, while the other 3 were dressed simply. "Wow, I didn't expect this river to be so beautiful. The lights on both sides are beautiful as well. Let's take a photo together," Ling Feifei suggested. Jin Wan had not found an opportunity to take a photo of Su Shui. To avoid alerting the enemy, she immediately agreed to this suggestion. After taking the photo, Jin Wan asked Ling Feifei to send her a copy. She saved the photo and confirmed that Su Shui's face was clear in the photo before sending it to Feng Ling. That night, 9:00 p.m. Mo Jingshan stood outside the condominium outside T University. Looking at the tightly locked door and the thin layer of dust on the lock, he was certain that Jin Wan had not stayed here for the past half a month. He opened the door and entered. The lights in the room were not turned on. The sky was already dark, and only the neon lights outside the window could be seen. A bonfire party with the theme of students and school had not ended yet? He picked up his phone and called Jin Wan. However, the other party's phone was turned off. Mo Jingshan's brows twitched. He looked into the distance at the lights on both sides of the river that ran through T-City. He called again, but her phone was still turned off. He abruptly turned to leave. The moment he stepped out, he saw Feng Ling appear by the elevator. Mr. Mo? Feng Ling was clearly surprised to see him here. Aren't you in High City? When did you come? Mo Jingshan saw that Feng Ling did not follow Jin Wan. He asked mildly, Where's Jin Wan? Mrs. Mo has a bonfire party tonight. I was supposed to go with her, but she took the bus to the river with the people from the school. She called me earlier to say that her phone was almost out of battery and asked me to come back to get a portable power supply for her. Mo Jingshan coldly said, She already turned off her phone. Is that so? Feng Ling was suspicious. She took out her phone to check. A few minutes ago Mrs. Mo just sent me a message. Why did it run out of battery so quickly? What message did she send you? Mo Jingshan glanced at her. Feng Ling paused. She was about to say that she was in a hurry to enter the elevator and hadn't looked at it when the man in front of her abruptly took her phone. Seeing the message from Jin Wan, Mo Jingshan swiped open the screen, and a high-definition photo of the four of them appeared on his cell phone. There was a line of words below. Feng Ling, have you seen this person in a white dress before? Mo Jingshan's eyes were fixed on the face of the woman in the white dress. Before Feng Ling could see his expression clearly, the man had already walked to the elevator with a cold and gloomy expression. The man who was usually calm and indifferent was still endlessly cold at this time, and his sharp eyes seemed to be filled with killing intent in an instant. As sharp as Feng Ling was, she immediately sensed something from Mo Jingshan's expression. She immediately rushed to catch up with him. Jin Wan was sitting by the riverside, away from the bustling crowd. Bai Wei brought over a freshly roasted mutton skewer for her. Thank you. Jin Wan received it, picking up a skewer and taking a bite. Bai Wei brought over 2 cans of beer. Jin Wan was still hesitating whether she should drink it or not. At this moment, Bai Wei happened to receive a call and went to the other side. Jin Wan picked up the beer and weighed it in her hand. Drink some? Forget it, it was better not to drink. After all, she had promised Mo Jingshan. But she still wanted to drink some. Just as she was in a dilemma, Su Shui approached from behind. My stomach isn't feeling well. There are too many people by the riverside and I can't see clearly. Where can I find a public bathroom? Can you accompany me to look for one? Jin Wan calmly glanced at her. It's in the forest over there. You can find it yourself if you walk that way. It's too dark in the forest. Come with me. I'm scared. Su Shui held her stomach, her complexion pale. It seemed like her stomach really wasn't feeling well. Jin Wan glanced at Bai Wei who was on the phone, and turned to see Ling Feifei enjoying herself in the crowd. The people she was most familiar with here were the few of them. Su Shui was indeed too embarrassed to ask others to accompany her. Although Jin Wan did not like interacting too much with Su Shui, she always felt that this person was strange from head to toe. But after all, they were staying in the same dormitory. Let's go. Jin Wan placed the skewers and beer down, standing up and patting her pants. The two walked into the dark forest by the side. The lights by the river could not reach here, and the path ahead was too dark. Jin Wan said, My phone's out of battery. Turn it on. Otherwise we won't be able to see the road clearly. My phone's also out of battery. Su Shui's voice was much softer than usual, as though she was purposely suppressing her voice. Jin Wan thought that her stomach was hurting and did not suspect anything. She reached behind her to support her, and the two of them continued walking in. As the crowd grew further and further away, the surroundings became unbelievably dark. Jin Wan clearly remembered that there were lights near the public bathroom. Why were they all off? Jin Wan. All of a sudden, Su Shui's voice rang by her side. Jin Wan was still wondering what was wrong with the lights when she heard Su Shui's soft voice again. Are you afraid of the dark? Jin Wan was about to answer when she felt that something was wrong. She and Su Shui had walked in the dark all the way here. Why was she suddenly asking this now? It was impossible for the lights here to be turned off so coincidentally at this time. They must have been damaged by someone. With this thought, Jin Wan's footsteps paused. She was about to turn around to look at Su Shui when she abruptly heard someone approaching. Hearing the sound, she instinctively wanted to call out, but before she could open her mouth, she was pressed down harshly. Her mouth and nose were also covered with a damp cloth. You guys, what are you doing, you? The surroundings were pitch black. She could not see Su Shui's expression, nor could she see the people around. Chapter 195. In the darkness, there was not a single crack of light to be found. After Jean Wan woke up, her eyes were opened in vain, but she could only see darkness. From the moment she woke up, she struggled violently until she gradually lost all strength. She could only lie there motionlessly. She was lying on a relatively wide bench, her hands behind her back, firmly tied by ropes under the bench. Her feet were also firmly tied to the other end of the bench. No matter how hard she struggled, she couldn't move at all. Her mouth was sealed with tape, so she couldn't open her mouth to call for help. This kind of situation was pitch black. When she woke up, she even suspected that her rebirth was just an unrealistic dream. Perhaps she was still living in that boundless darkness of her previous life, or perhaps she was still locked up in some poor and backward mountain village, waiting to be forcefully sold by the villagers. The darkness was frightening. She did not even know how much time had passed. All of a sudden, the sound of messy footsteps approached from outside. Jean Wan subconsciously shut her eyes. Creak. The heavy metal door was opened. The sound of two people's footsteps approached. The air was filled with the sweat of an unfamiliar man, causing one to feel disgusted. Jean Wan closed her eyes and did not move. Did you use too much medicine on that cloth? Why hasn't this chick woken up yet? Ignore her. Miss Su only told us to kidnap her and send her out when the time is right. Whether she lives or dies has nothing to do with us. She's so pretty. Isn't it too much of a pity to send her over like this? Why don't we play for a bit? Play your head. Miss Su told us to leave T-City immediately after we're done. This chick's background isn't simple. Isn't she just a T-University student? What kind of background can she have at such a young age? Don't ask so much. Immediately send her to that bar. If we don't send her there, we won't get a single cent of the remaining 1 million yuan. We don't know who leaked the news, but right now this area has already been patrolled by police cars many times. Do things cleanly. Since she hasn't woken up yet, it'll save us some trouble. At this moment, Jean Wan abruptly opened her eyes. The two tall and strong men were shining flashlights on her body. When they saw her suddenly open her eyes, they seemed to be startled. Jean Wan narrowed her eyes slightly in the glare of the flashlight, but her mouth kept making woo-woo sounds. Big brother, does she want to talk? Woo-woo-woo. Jean Wan made a few more sounds. Hearing that her voice seemed to have a different pitch, as if she really wanted to say something, the two men looked at each other and chose to ignore her. You woke up so quickly. How troublesome. Hurry up and take him away. Woo-woo-woo. Jean Wan's eyes widened as she stared at them. She couldn't move her hands and the tape on her mouth prevented her from saying a word. She could only stare at them with hope in her eyes and keep repeating those three tones. Big brother, she really seems to be saying something. The other man finally glanced at Jean Wan. As Jean Wan continued to struggle and make those few tones, he abruptly tore off the tape on her mouth. A piercing pain came from her lips. Jean Wan couldn't care less. In such a situation she couldn't shout, or else it would only bring about a fatal disaster. She took a deep breath and said, How much money did the people who kidnapped me promise to pay you? Let me go. I can pay double. Those people still owe you 1 million yuan, right? Let me go now and I can give it to you immediately. She had just finished speaking when the man abruptly sealed the tape on her mouth again. Woo-woo. Jean Wan stared hard at them, her mouth still repeating the same tone. Big brother, the man had a knife scar on his face. He coldly glanced at Jean Wan. You want to live, right? Jean Wan hurriedly nodded, her gaze sincere. She was certain that if these two were only doing this for money, perhaps there would be a chance. You have money to give us? The man still had a doubtful expression. Jean Wan nodded again, making an woo sound. It was a confirmation. The money Miss Su gave us is her share. If you want to buy your life from our hands, it won't be as simple as just paying double. The man suddenly revealed a cold and greedy smile. He shone the flashlight on Jean Wan's body, and finally shone the blinding light on her eyes. She had no choice but to close her eyes and turn her head to avoid it. He said in a rough voice, Miss Su wanted us to send you to T-City's largest underground bar. With your looks, you can easily sell for 2 million yuan a night there. After that, you can be sold to a smuggling ship in the Philippines and continue to earn a sum. Just our share is already quite a bit. If you want to buy your life from our hands, how much more can you pay? Jean Wan's expression faltered. The two men's greedy expressions were too obvious. She tried her best to maintain her composure as she stared at their faces, wondering where their bottom line was. Big brother, she seems to be intentionally stalling for time. The moment the person by the side spoke, the man coldly narrowed his eyes and stared at Jean Wan. Don't think about waiting for someone to save you just because you're wasting time. Right now your life is in our hands. I'll offer 5 million yuan. Will you give it? Jin Wan's expression faltered for a moment before she nodded. Her gaze was sincere. How? A check. This man was clearly much more decisive and calm than the person by the side. He did not give Jin Wan any chance to speak or shout for help. He only observed Jin Wan's expression, watching for her to nod or shake her head. Jin Wan nodded. You. The man by the side immediately stared at her with bright eyes, as though he had seen a god of fortune. The two exchanged glances and suddenly pulled her up from the chair. The moment Jin Wan's hands regained their freedom, the man who had been conversing with her the entire time took out a blank check from his pocket. The man pressed Jin Wan onto the ground forcefully and tugged on one of her hands. He stuffed a pen into her hands. If you want your life, sign the check immediately. 5 million yuan. Account name and amount. Write it for me right now. Jin Wan was pressed onto the ground. She stared at the blank check in front of her and suddenly felt like cursing. The two of them were clearly repeat kidnappers. It was clear that they were too familiar with the ways of this rich young master. The few sentences they exchanged clearly showed that they had no intention of letting her off. Instead, they were trying to swindle more money out of the victim. They actually carried around this kind of blank check from who knows which bank they obtained it from. The hope and vitality that had just been ignited instantly dissipated. She lay stiffly on the ground, unmoving. She held the pen in her hand, but she stared at it intently. She refused to sign a single word. Chapter 196. The bones in Jin Wan's hand were about to break. She endured the pain and stared at the check, unwilling to move. The man standing behind suddenly pulled out a sharp knife, lowering his voice to threaten her. You only have two choices. Sign the check and we'll leave this knife to you. You can find a chance to cut the rope and escape. 5 million to buy a chance to escape. Or we can use this knife to cut the tendons in your arms and legs. Or we can cut your face piece by piece. Sign or not. Choose. Jian silently furrowed her brows. 5 million to buy a knife? However, these two people were not joking at all. The back of her hand was about to break. Although they were utterly heartless, the current situation was one of survival of the fittest. In the world of desperados, life was too cheap. She abruptly raised her eyes and glared at the man who was stepping on the back of her hand. The man saw her gaze and moved his foot away. He tossed the pen back to her hand and ordered, "Sign. 5 million, not a single cent less." Jin Wan glanced at the knife in the other man's hand. The man also tossed the knife back to her. His meaning was clear. If she dared to sign, they would dare to give the knife to her. Whether or not she could seize the chance to escape was entirely up to her. Jin Wan hesitated for a moment. She slowly moved her hand that was aching and numb from being stepped on earlier. She picked up the pen and signed the check. As she signed, she thought about what had happened. Her previous suspicions of Su Shui were correct. The other party did not come with good intentions. They pretended to be naive to approach her. If they were not inquiring about her, they were observing her every move. After hiding by her side for more than half a month, they indeed harbored evil intentions. Seeing that she had written everything she needed to write on the check, the two men finally pulled her up from the ground. Jin Wan staggered, unable to stand steadily. Her hands were once again tied behind her. Although her body had left the bench, she was not in a state of freedom. She wondered if she would encounter two scoundrels who had no sense of morality at all. When the man in front tied her hands behind her back, he folded the foldable knife and stuffed it into her palm. He then tied her hands behind her back in a very clever way so that no one could see what was in her hands. I've already given you the saber. Don't say that we don't follow the rules of the martial world. The man tied her up tightly, looking as if he was satisfied with the 5 million yuan. He lowered his voice and said, Miss Su's people are guarding outside. We have to send you to the bar now. After we send you there, we'll leave. If the rope near your middle finger and index finger is cut, you'll be able to untie it yourself. What do you think? Was the 5 million yuan well spent? If Jin Wan's mouth wasn't taped, she really wanted to scold them. She suppressed her fear and anger, tightly holding onto the foldable knife in her hand. She then coldly stared at the two men. Stop glaring. It's rare to see someone as tactful as you. That Miss Su's background isn't small. She knows where our hideout is. If it was any other brother, they wouldn't sell out all the brothers in their hideout for a mere 5 million yuan. Seeing that Jin Wan was obediently allowing them to tie her up and did not struggle, The man spoke again and signaled to the man beside him with his eyes. When the two men brought Jinwan out, before she could clearly see her surroundings, her eyes were abruptly covered with a black cloth. The fear of falling into darkness once more caused her to lose confidence. She frantically struggled, but the two men had already brought her to a car. There should be someone in the car. They no longer had the patience they had when tying her up. They harshly scolded her and pushed her with force. Jinwan abruptly felt as though she had been pushed into someone else's hands. Could it be that these people were Miss Su's people? What exactly was Su Shui's background? Her eyes were covered and could not see anything. Suddenly she was pushed into the car by those people. Outside T-City's largest underground bar, there was an endless stream of cars and neon lights. Among the rows of cars, Su Shui sat in a black Audi. From afar, she watched as Jinwan was dragged out of a van by those people. She then watched as Jinwan staggered as she was dragged into the bar. Only then did her lips slowly curve up. Her seemingly innocent face was dyed with sharp viciousness. After confirming that Jinwan had already been brought in and would not be able to easily escape, she finally called for the driver to drive away. The black Audi drove out of the street near the bar. On the road, Su Shui's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and excitedly picked up the call. "Cousin, you're calling at this time. Is it to celebrate that I've helped you settle the matter?" Hearing the voice from the other side of the phone, Su Shui smiled widely. "You're still worried about me? Of course I won't take her life. What I want to do is to help you destroy her." In the car, only Su Shui's complacent voice could be heard. "Of course, if she dies, Mo Jingshan will only remember her forever. You won't have the chance to return to his side, and his heart won't be able to hold a place for anyone other than a dead person. But if she's destroyed, living in such a filthy state in this world, sooner or later, he'll lose his appetite for her. That Jinwan is more vigilant than we thought. We were almost discovered by her. When she heard that I came from Los Angeles, she seemed to be especially sensitive to Los Angeles. I think she already knew of your existence a long time ago. No matter how vigilant she is, didn't she still end up in my hands? If it weren't for the fact that Uncle has grounded you at home and you personally came from America, this show would have been even more exciting. If Mo Jingshan hadn't issued a warning to the Su family, Uncle wouldn't have grounded you. Even I feel it's a pity that you missed this good show, but don't worry. Leave this to me. I'll definitely beat the Jinwan until there's no place left unscathed. I'll completely lose to you both physically and mentally." Su Shui was still talking to her phone. All of a sudden, the car she was sitting in screeched to a halt. She had just hung up the phone when she lost her grip and abruptly dropped it. She raised her head and was about to scold the driver with a cold expression when the corner of her eyes suddenly paused. Chapter 197. It was a black off-road vehicle. It decisively forced her car to stop. Su Shui's hand paused as she was about to pick up her phone. She stared ahead and suddenly said, "Drive." The driver said hesitantly, "But Miss Su, the car in front. I told you to drive. Drive away immediately. Hurry. Go around that car." Su Shui ordered anxiously. The driver could only start the engine and quickly reverse the car. He then immediately turned the car around and drove in the opposite direction. Su Shui picked up her phone and gripped it tightly. She stared at the off-road vehicle in the rearview mirror. Seeing that the car was approaching at a merciless speed, she rushed to shout, "Drive faster! Faster!" The driver sped up. His gaze was fixed on the car behind. Silently, he sensed a murderous intent approaching and instinctively stepped on the accelerator. As they sped up, the black off-road vehicle also sped up. When they reached an empty road, the black off-road vehicle sped up even more. Seeing that she could not shake it off, Su Shui furrowed her brows and decided to give up the chase. She ordered the driver to stop the car in front. However, the moment the car stopped, Su Shui thought that the black off-road vehicle behind would also stop. At the very least, it would not hit her. However, the black off-road vehicle did not stop, nor did it slow down. Instead, it sped up again. By the time Su Shui reacted, the car had already rushed over. Pung! It was a loud sound that caused people's hearts to tremble. It was a huge collision. Su Shui's calm expression instantly turned pale. She sat in the car in a daze. Her car, which had been parked by the road, was forcefully knocked 2 or 3 meters away. The safety barrier by the side of the road had been completely deformed by the car. If the other party had used a little more force, her car would have rolled down the safety barrier. This road was lined with T-City's rivers. They were very high and very deep. If her car rolled down, she would definitely die. Her face was pale. She stared in disbelief at the dent in front of her car. After several seconds of silence, Su Shui slowly raised her head. She stared in shock at the unscathed off-road vehicle. The direction of the collision was so precise, and the hardest part of their car was used as a sharp blade. Was the person driving the car the bodyguard Mo Jingshan had arranged to stay by Jinwan's side, or Mo Jingshan himself? Su Shui stared ahead with a startled expression. When the door of the black off-road vehicle opened and Mo Jingshan stepped out of the car, all the blood in her body turned ice cold. T-City's underground bar. When the door of the stuffy room was opened again, in just a few minutes, Jinwan was already suffocated by the stuffy air, and her body was covered with a layer of sweat. When the door was opened, she subconsciously raised her head. Although her eyes were covered with a black cloth, she still listened carefully to the voice on the other side. Is that her? An unfamiliar and rough voice sounded in front of them. The people around him echoed, and it seemed like someone was calling that person boss. Jinwan furrowed her brows. She was not very familiar with the underground bars in T-City, but under normal circumstances, the people in these bars were all involved in illegal activities. It was impossible for them to be good people. These people mostly walked on the edge of the illegal world and had some connections with the underworld. That Su Shui was even able to contact these kinds of people. Jinwan could not help but wonder what exactly they did in Los Angeles. Her looks aren't bad. It's been a long time since I've seen such a beautiful one. Her skin is also so fair. She can definitely be sold for a good price. Bring her over. Afterward, someone came over and removed the black cloth from Jinwan's face. Jinwan narrowed her eyes. She was momentarily unable to adjust to the light and was unable to see the person clearly. Her ponytail was abruptly undone, and her long hair scattered messily across her shoulders. Very good. She looks even more beautiful and delicate like this. Wipe her face clean. We'll start selling her in 10 minutes. Jinwan forced her eyes open and looked forward. She could only see a man with a knife scar on his face, dressed in a black trench coat. He had a cigar in his mouth and was commenting on her figure and appearance. After giving a few more instructions, he turned around and left. There were only a few people who appeared to be bodyguards left in the room. One of them suddenly brought an ice-cold towel over and wiped her face harshly. Jinwan's face hurt from the rubbing. She glared at them, but the tape on her mouth was still there. What are you glaring at? Behave yourself. The person who wiped her face coldly reprimanded. He then pinched her chin and said in a rascally manner, "This little girl's looks are indeed not bad. After we sell her for a good price tonight, I wonder if boss will bestow her to us to play with for a few days before selling her to the Philippines. Look at this little face, it's indeed so fair." As he spoke, he touched Jinwan's face and acted as though he was about to kiss her. Jinwan shifted her face away in disgust. Her eyes were filled with anger and disgust as she glared at him. Damn it, why don't you glare at me again? This old man will dig out your eyes. The man abruptly spat on the ground. He was extremely dissatisfied with her stubborn temper. If boss had not said that he would sell her for a good price later, he really wished he could rip off her clothes right now. Jinwan continued to glare at him. The man used the towel to wipe her face and neck harshly again. He used a lot of force and rubbed her pale skin until it was slightly red. He then stopped and called for the others to bring her out. Afterward, just like in her previous life, Jinwan was like a fish on a chopping board. She was tied up and thrown into the bar stands. The clothes on her shoulders were slightly torn, revealing her fair shoulders. Her hair fell down to cover them, half covering her face. Her eyes, which were sealed with tape, tried their best to hide the fear and helplessness in them. She stared coldly at the people in the bar and attracted the attention of most of them. Afterward, she did not pay attention to how much those people called out. She only knew that after the buyer was confirmed, she was directly brought down. She was thrown into the bar's basement. Her body was still tied up, and she was curled up on a single bed with a thin blanket. Although it was a basement, it was clearly prepared for those lovers. It was a very small room, but the decorations were very high-end. It was completely in the European style. Even the bed she was lying on was not cheap. There were also all sorts of waxes, candlesticks, whips, handcuffs, and other utensils. At this moment, the only light in the basement was a dim wall lamp. She narrowed her eyes slightly, carefully listening to the sounds outside. Chapter 198. Her bound hands were drenched in cold sweat. After confirming that the voices outside were far away, Jinwan carefully turned the folding knife she had been holding in her hand for a long time. As it turned, the 5 million yuan check she signed was not completely useless. The person who bound her hands was indeed skillful in tying the rope around her wrists. It could be said that he had been quite righteous. She twisted her wrist forcefully and gradually, there was some space between her two hands. Then she slowly opened the folding knife. Remembering what the man had said before, she used the sharp blade to cut the rope between her index finger and middle finger forcefully. With her hands tied, it was really inconvenient for her to move. She had already spent a lot of time and effort on these actions. Right now, her body was covered in a layer of sweat, and she could not use the strength to cut the rope. She could only use the knife to grind it bit by bit. After grinding for more than 2 minutes, the rope broke. She did not dare to relax. Bit by bit, she used the intricate knot on the rope to untie it completely. Once her hands were free, she quickly tore off the tape on her mouth. Her mouth was most likely torn red. She endured the pain and held her breath. She bent down and used the knife to cut the rope around her feet. When she finally regained her freedom, she carefully stood up bit by bit. Her legs were already numb from being tied up. She staggered to the door and listened to the movements outside. It was as though these people were certain that she would not be able to escape and did not send anyone to guard the door. Earlier, when she was brought in, she knew that there was a narrow and dimly lit corridor outside. At the end of the corridor was a staircase, and up the staircase was a hidden door in the corner of the bar that was blocked by a sound system. Jinwan tried to push the door and found that it was locked. No wonder there was no one guarding outside. She rushed to remove a thin black hair clip from the top of her head. In her previous life and her previous life, perhaps this was the only time she could thank her previous life for her miserable escape experience. Everything in her previous life had taught her a lot. At the very least, she could open a simple door like this. It was not a security door and she only needed a little time to open it. Jinwan tried placing the hair clip by the doorknob toward the keyhole inside. She used force to poke the thinner side of the hair clip into the keyhole. Because she did not dare to make too much noise, she could only carefully push it back and forth in the keyhole. This basement only had a simple wooden door, and the lock was also a simple single lock. Time passed bit by bit. The anxiety in Jinwan's heart grew heavier and heavier. Every time she heard footsteps coming from outside, she would grab the hair clip in fright and turn to hide behind the door in a defensive posture. She did this countless times and finally, the hair clip found its place in the keyhole. The sound of the door being unlocked was very soft. She gently released a breath, pinning the hair clip back on her head and opened the door handle. The moment the door opened, the deafening roar of the bar instantly assaulted her ears. Jinwan stuck her head out and observed the surroundings. She then quietly closed the door and pressed against the wall. She lowered her head and tried her best not to be captured by the surveillance cameras in the corner. After much difficulty, she finally reached the staircase. All of a sudden, she saw a figure approaching. She was startled and immediately turned around to see that the door to the room beside her was not locked. She rushed to enter that door and leaned against it. Her heart beat heavily as she listened to the movements outside. The room before her was not lit. However, when she opened the door earlier, she saw that the layout of this room was almost the same as the one she was in earlier. It seemed like every room in this underground corridor was the same. She was considering how to escape. There were people all around the bar. She did not know which were the customers and which were the staff of the bar. How could she avoid them? All of a sudden, the sound of footsteps came from outside the door. As she listened to the sound, the hair on Jinwan's body stood on end. The footsteps seemed to be heading toward the room she was in earlier. There was a sudden silence inside, and this silence gradually made her panic. As expected, as the strange silence passed, she heard an angry and suppressed voice. She shouldn't have escaped too far. Go look for her immediately. She actually brought something that can cut the rope? Which bastard kidnapped her? Damn it. Go look for her. Then the sound of footsteps outside gradually increased. It was somewhat hurried, and at the same time the surrounding rooms were kicked open one by one. Jinwan furrowed her brows and carefully hid under a black shelf by the side. She squatted down and held her breath. Look in every room. As the footsteps approached, someone abruptly kicked open the door of this room. The lights in the room were turned on. As if they had been inspecting the other rooms along the way, they hurriedly glanced around the room, turned off the lights, closed the door and went to check the other rooms. Perhaps they did not expect Jinwan to hide in such a close place. The burly men were in a hurry to check and did not notice Jinwan hiding under the table. Jinwan released a light breath and crawled out from under the table. She listened to the movements outside and then ran to the door, pressing her ear against it. She didn't know what time it was, but she heard the footsteps of those people getting further and further away. It seemed like they had gone out to search and didn't continue to stay in the underground corridor. She waited for a while before carefully opening the door. Then she slowly walked to the staircase. Most of the people in this bar were their men. How was she going to escape? Climbing up the stairs, she saw the neon lights in the bar. Jinwan bent down and carefully pushed open the door behind the stereo system. She looked out and saw all kinds of people outside. She lowered her head and covered her face with her loose hair. She followed the corner of the door and walked to the side. When a waiter approached, she hurriedly squatted down and hid behind a sofa. She then turned to look at the waiter. He was holding a tray and wine in his hand and was talking to the waiter by the side. Clearly, the flashing lights here made it difficult for people to see clearly. The waiter did not notice Jinwan. Jinwan turned around, maintaining her squatting position as she ran to the back of the other sofa. The lights in the bar flickered incessantly. Taking advantage of the dimming of the lights, she successfully leaped over without attracting anyone's attention. She walked along the back of these sofas and came to a place with fewer people. She looked out and planned to run out in one breath. Chapter 199. Unfortunately, there were people guarding the entrance of the bar. Jinwan wanted to rush out in a fit of anger, but that was only a thought. The moment her figure appeared, no matter how fast she ran, the moment she was discovered by the people at the door, they nimbly came over and pressed her down. Just as she was about to cry for help, they covered her mouth and dragged her back. Jinwan could not break free. In the blink of an eye, she was brought back to the basement and thrown onto the ground. The pain on her body could not compare to the hatred in her heart. All her earlier struggles were futile. She raised her head and saw that the boss with the knife scar on his face was actually here. He stepped forward and grabbed her hair. Jinwan endured it and did not cry out in pain. However, her body was forced to lean forward due to the tug of her hair. The boss's expression was ugly as he dragged her and threw her harshly onto the bed. "You're the first woman to have the ability to escape from the basement." The boss coldly glanced at her before ordering the people behind him, "Watch her. When the buyer is done drinking, don't let her escape again. If she escapes again, don't even think of living." Afterward, the door was locked once more. There were already people guarding the door. Jinwan glared at the door, her hands gripping the thin blanket beneath her tightly. Right now, her hands and feet were no longer tied up, but there was no way she could leave this room. Not long after, the so-called buyer, a fat, bespectacled middle-aged man in his 40s, came in. The moment he saw Jinwan, he put on a wretched smile and approached her step by step. Jinwan was startled. Taking advantage of the fact that the guards had left and that the bespectacled man had drunk too much, she grabbed the lamp on the bedside table and threw it at him. "Your temper isn't small," the bespectacled man said as he suddenly took off his clothes, revealing his plump upper body. Jinwan was disgusted by the sight. She leaned against the wall but felt that this scene was extremely familiar. In her previous life, she was sold to a father and son's home in that poor mountain village. That father and his foolish son had once stripped naked and forced her into a corner. Even though she had escaped, even though she had mutilated herself and covered herself in blood so that they couldn't get close to her or touch her, those terrifying memories still lingered in her mind. Jinwan didn't want to be affected by the terrible memories of her previous life. She tried to calm herself down, but the white flesh in front of her still made her nauseous. Just as she suddenly leaned against the wall and retched, the bespectacled middle-aged man suddenly rushed over, grabbed her hair and pulled her close to him. As soon as Jinwan's whole body was pressed against his white flesh, her hair stood on end. "Let me go. Little bitch, I heard that you wanted to escape just now. I spent more than 2 million to buy you a few nights and you dare to run? Do you believe that this old man won't kill you right now?" The other party ignored Jinwan's struggles and abruptly threw her harshly back onto the bed. He threw her with too much force, and Jinwan was thrown to the innermost position against the wall. Her head knocked heavily against the wall and she instantly felt dizzy. Her vision darkened and she raised her hand to touch her forehead. When she lowered her hand, she saw a patch of blood on her palm. The wall was decorated with all kinds of small pebbles, so it wasn't smooth. Her impact was not light either. Seeing the blood on her palm, Jinwan's vision darkened. She forced herself to sit against the wall, and in the blink of an eye, she saw him pouncing toward her. Her heart instantly beat wildly, but the moment she tried to move, she felt dizzy and could not move. She could only force her body to move slightly, but it was completely useless. "Don't touch me." Scram! At this moment, Jinwan did not have the strength to struggle. Even sitting steadily was difficult. The sound of clothes being forcefully torn came from the air. She cried out in protest, but she suddenly felt the side of the bed sink. The bespectacled middle-aged man was pressing down on her with his fat body that was about to ooze oil. The bespectacled man took advantage of the fact that she did not have the strength to dodge and saw the blood flowing from her head. The smell of blood and her white skin stimulated his desires and senses. He frantically pressed her down on the bed, pressing down on her. He lowered his head to nibble on the alluring white skin on her neck. Jinwan felt a wave of disgust. Her heart harshly contracted as she screamed, "Don't!" A small portion of her clothes had been torn open. The buttons on the front of her body popped open like beans. Her clothes were suddenly wide open. Even though she was still wearing a tight-fitting camisole underneath, she still felt a chill on her upper body. Both her hands were held by her sides. She did her best to curl up and kick him away. Her lips were already bitten hard by herself and they turned purple. Her entire body trembled violently. The scene of her struggling on the bed by her father in her previous life overlapped with the scene before her. Jinwan wanted to calm down and protect herself, but she could not endure the double stimulation. Her entire body was on the verge of breaking down and screaming, "Smelly whore. You're quite strong." The bespectacled man pressed down on her. He lowered his head and was about to tear off her clothes. Jinwan abruptly turned her head and bit down on his ear. She used the strength to bite off his ear. In pain, he abruptly pushed her away. He raised his hand and gave her a harsh slap. Half of Jinwan's face was in so much pain that she lost consciousness. The dizziness in her head intensified. He abruptly grabbed her hair, looked at the blood on her forehead and the corner of her mouth, put down his hand that was covering her ear, and slapped the same side of her face harshly. Seeing that half of her face was already swollen, he finally put on an expression that said he wanted to trample her to death. Taking advantage of the fact that she no longer had the strength to struggle, he grabbed a corner of the blanket and stuffed it into her mouth to prevent her from biting him again. Jinwan's breathing was heavy. Looking at the disgusting face and white flesh in front of her, she suddenly retched. Suddenly she heard the sound of police sirens near the bar. Jinwan thought she was hearing things. Her weak body was pressed against the bed by the bespectacled man. He tugged at her hair with one hand and tugged at her jeans with the other. Because the zipper of her pants was slightly tight, he used both hands to tug at it while cursing. Jinwan wanted to get up and push him away, but she really could not muster up any strength. Just as the zipper was pulled open, the bespectacled man's eyes brightened. He scolded her again, calling her a smelly whore. He used force to pull down her pants. All of a sudden, a loud ping came from the tightly shut basement door. It was kicked open. Her vision was blurry. Jinwan did not even have the strength to turn her head to look. She could only see Mo Jingshin's face from the corner of her eye. Chapter 200. The bespectacled man's hand was still pressed against Jinwan's body, tugging on the zipper of her pants without letting go. This unbearably filthy scene caused her blood to turn cold. When she turned to meet Mo Jingshin's gaze, she felt as though she had fallen into an ice cave. Mo Jingshin's clear eyes were already filled with a storm that was akin to a landslide or tsunami. Jinwan was dazed for a moment. Wasn't he still in High City? Why was he in T-City? Could she have been so agitated that she was hallucinating? However, she could not speak. She could only stare in that direction with a pair of blank and empty eyes. It was as though it was the only warm light in the darkness of despair. It was as though it had saved her from the terror of her previous lives, allowing her to finally breathe. She could barely see how he had come over. She only knew that the bespectacled man on top of her suddenly cried out in pain. The sound of bones breaking rang out as though someone had twisted his arm. She tried her best to focus and saw that Mo Jingshin was within arm's reach. His cold eyes did not even blink as he twisted his arm, throwing the wretched bespectacled man off the bed. She felt her body lighten, and in an instant she felt a familiar coat with a clean and refreshing smell covering her body. Jinwan closed her eyes tiredly, forcing her tears back. By her ears, the bespectacled man's pained cries rang out one after another. She did not know what Mo Jingshin was doing, nor did she wish to look. Right now, even if some people here were to lose their lives, she would not care about the law or human nature. The man fell to the ground and was kicked again. He was kicked 2 meters away and slammed into the wall. His head slammed heavily against the cobblestone wall, and he cried out in pain. His face was flushed red from the pain, and he pointed shakily at the man who had suddenly barged in. He wanted to speak, but the sound of the door opening drowned him out. Feng Ling rushed in. When she saw the scene inside, she immediately understood something. She was about to enter when she suddenly heard Mo Jingshan's cold voice. "Close the door." Feng Ling glanced at Jin Wan, who was lying on the bed, and subconsciously closed the door behind her, cutting off the gazes of the police outside. Jin Wan was still in a daze when she was suddenly supported up. She opened her eyes to see Mo Jingshan's face. She wanted to ask why he had come to T-City, but when the words reached her lips, the slightly dried blood on the corner of her lips and her swollen face caused her to furrow her brows. Before she could speak, she heard Mo Jingshan whisper by her ear, "If it hurts, don't speak. I'm here." Although his voice was cold and low, he was gently coaxing and comforting her. At the same time, he wrapped the upper half of her body tightly with the coat she was wearing. He then raised his hand to push aside the hair on her forehead that was stained with blood. When he saw the wound on her head, he gently turned her face to check the palm marks on her face. The killing intent in his eyes was obvious. Although Jin Wan knew that she was out of danger, her body was still trembling instinctively. All the struggle and fear from before were still spreading in her body and mind. She wanted to calm herself down, but the scenes from her previous life kept dominating her rational nerves. Her body was trembling, her hands were trembling, her eyes opened and closed, and her eyes were bloodshot. Her eyelashes were trembling, and she tried hard to hold back the tears that were on the verge of falling. Mo Jingshan held her trembling body tightly, gently caressing her hair mixed with blood and sweat as he whispered, "Don't be afraid. I'm here in front of you. It's all over. Be good and close your eyes. Don't listen. Don't look." Jin Wan did not move. Mo Jingshan raised his hand and gently covered her eyes. "Don't be afraid, okay?" Feng Ling saw Jin Wan's sorry figure and the blood on her head and abruptly kicked the middle-aged bespectacled man's crotch harshly. The subsequent scream caused Jin Wan, who was leaning against Mo Jingshan's arms, to tremble. It was as though every time she heard this disgusting man scream, she would be stimulated in a different way. Cripple him and gag his mouth. He's too noisy. Mo Jingshan saw that Jin Wan could not take any stimulation right now and sternly ordered. Feng Ling quickly grabbed a piece of clothing on the ground, rolled it into a ball and stuffed it into the man's mouth. She then stepped on his leg, and when he kept groaning in pain, she gave him a roundhouse kick on the head. Right now, only muffled cries of pain could be heard in the basement. The bespectacled man's head was covered in blood and sweat. In the end, he leaned against the corner of the wall and fell to the ground. He looked at the short-haired woman in front of him with a frightened expression. He trembled and tried to move back, but was still kicked harshly by Feng Ling. This time the kick landed on his abdomen. The bespectacled man was in so much pain that his eyeballs almost popped out. Following that, there was the sound of his other arm bone being broken. Even though his mouth was gagged, the miserable groans were enough to tell what kind of inhumane torture and revenge he was currently enduring. Jin Wan closed her eyes and leaned against Mo Jingshan's chest. Her eyes were covered by him and she could not see anything here. However, the red and swollen patch on her pale face was still shocking. Miserable groans followed one after another. Jin Wan's hand suddenly touched the folding knife that she had previously thrown by the bedside. Her movements faltered and she suddenly gripped the knife tightly. In a hoarse voice she said, "Jingshan, put me down." Mo Jingshan glanced at her and released her. Although Jin Wan was in a sorry state and her head was covered in blood, with Mo Jingshan's clothes draped over her, she still felt a special sense of security. She turned her eyes toward the bespectacled man who had been tortured to the point where he wished he was dead. She abruptly got off the bed. Feng Ling turned back to look at her. She saw that Jin Wan was staggering and could barely stand. She rushed over to support her but was stopped by Mo Jingshan's gaze. Seeing that Mo Jingshan did not move to stop her, Feng Ling faltered and took a step back. As expected, Jin Wan opened the folding knife in her hand. Her reddened eyes stared at the disgusting man in the corner who was barely breathing. Seeing the white, fleshy flesh on his body, the scenes of that small village in her previous life flashed before her eyes. She did not know where she got the strength from, but she abruptly pounced forward and ruthlessly stabbed the knife in her hand into his palm. The bespectacled man's entire body convulsed in pain. He opened his bloodshot eyes and stared at her in disbelief. This was the hand that had ripped off her clothes earlier. Jin Wan forcefully pulled out the knife and stabbed it into the base of his thigh. Seeing blood gurgling out, her heart that was filled with suppressed fear finally felt a little better. She continued to brandish the knife in her hand. Her eyes did not even blink. Not only did she stab once, she stabbed again and again. Even when the bespectacled man's entire body was covered in a pool of blood, she still did not stop. Old Mo. Feng Ling watched this scene and wanted to step forward. However, she saw that although Jin Wan's stabs were extremely vicious, most of them were only stabbing the man's legs, hands and arms. She did not injure any vital parts. Chapter 201. Since she needed to vent, he would let her vent. After all, Mr. Mo was here. No one could touch a single hair on her. Even when his entire body was covered in blood, Jin Wan's eyes were bloodshot as she continued stabbing him with the knife. Outside, the sound of the police knocking on the door could be heard. Mo Jingshan abruptly stood up and walked over to Jin Wan's back, pulling her into his embrace. He pressed her tightly against his chest, forcefully stopping her from charging forward. He bent down to whisper by her ear, "All right, that's enough." Jin Wan's eyes were still bloodshot as she glared at the man who was convulsing in pain and had no strength to stand up. She gritted her teeth and glared at him. Mo Jingshan seized the opportunity before the police knocked on the door and snatched the knife from her hand, throwing it to the ground. Jin Wan seemed to have lost her mind. She struggled desperately to break free from his embrace and continued to charge toward the man. Mo Jingshan pressed her down. "Wan, calm down." Jin Wan did not listen and continued to struggle. Mo Jingshan abruptly turned her around, forcing her to face him. His deep, black eyes stared at her. "Jin Wan." After seeing Mo Jingshan's face clearly, Jin Wan's movements stiffened. She no longer struggled and only stared at him in a daze. Her bloodshot eyes stared into his black ones. His heavy voice carried a hint of coaxing by her ear, calming her agitated and violent emotions. "I'll make them pay the price they deserve. Those who shouldn't be breathing won't be spared. Right now you need to calm down and rest. If you're injured, you need to go see a doctor. Don't make me worry. Be obedient." Jin Wan stared at him for a long while before softly leaning into his embrace. She closed her eyes, her head drooping weakly against his chest. "Mrs. Mo." Seeing that she had fainted, Feng Ling furrowed her brows. Her gaze was filled with worry and heartache. Mo Jingshan did not speak. He wrapped Jin Wan tightly with his jacket and carried her up by the waist. His cold eyes glanced at the half-dead man covered in blood on the ground. "Cooperate fully with the police's investigation. Capture all the hidden gangs in this underground bar. Before dawn, I want none of them to be spared." Feng Ling nodded and did not speak further. She watched as Mo Jingshan carried Jin Wan and was about to leave when she suddenly said, "Mr. Mo, Miss Sue's cousin?" Hearing these words, Mo Jingshan's eyes darkened slightly. He used an extremely cold voice to say, "You don't have to interfere in America's Sioux family's matters. I have my own plans on how to deal with people who refuse to mend their ways." Feng Ling understood the hidden meaning in his words and nodded. Since the Sioux family did not take Mo Jingshan's warning to heart, then no matter how powerful the Sioux family's background was, they would not have peace in the future. When the police rushed in and saw this scene, they also saw the middle-aged bespectacled man covered in blood on the ground. None of them expected this to happen. When they saw Mo Jingshan carrying Jin Wan, whose face was pale and head was covered in blood, out, none of them dared to stop him. Only one of the police officers approached, his expression trembling with fear and concern. "Mr. Mo, the underground bar caused such a ruckus on a street, and T-City's police didn't even put on an act to control this place. Did they think that T-City's sky is high and the Emperor is far away, and no one would be able to investigate?" Mo Jingshan threw down the words in a heavy voice. "T-City's police force is worthy of suspicion." The police officer's expression immediately stiffened. "Mr. Mo, don't worry. This bar and everything that happened today will all be recorded. We will definitely give you a satisfactory answer." Mo Jingshan carried the unconscious Jin Wan in his arms and walked out through the path that the police had automatically opened up. He walked up from the basement. Inside the bar, the owner with a knife scar on his face and his subordinates were all restrained by the police. Mo Jingshan coldly glanced at the so-called bar boss. "You dare to touch my woman. Are you tired of living?" Mo Jingshan's voice seemed to be coated with a layer of frost. The bar boss did not make a sound. When he learned that the woman he brought in today was actually the wife of the great Mo Corporation CEO, he knew that it was useless for him to walk this path for so many years. Today he was really finished. By the time Jin Wan was brought out of the bar, it was already late at night. There were more than 10 police cars parked outside the bar. Even though she was unconscious, she did not feel safe. Hearing the sirens of the police cars outside, she closed her eyes and silently furrowed her brows. Half an hour later at the hospital. A group of helpless doctors exchanged glances before turning to look at the woman who was curled up on the bed. Her head was still covered in blood, and her body was trembling uncontrollably. 10 minutes ago this Miss G was sent in. She was instructed to clean up her wounds and check if there were any other injuries or problems on her body. Because the police had followed along, the gentleman who brought her in was currently negotiating with the police outside the consultation room. However, this Miss G had already been here for more than 10 minutes. Even now, she did not allow any of them to touch her. Regardless of whether it was a doctor or a nurse or a man or a woman, no one was allowed to approach her. Even a harmless-looking and considerate nurse handed her a glass of water, wanting her to drink some water to calm down, but the glass was pushed away and dropped by her. It could be seen that her emotions were very unstable, and she must have suffered a huge shock. Her eyes were unfocused, and only the trembling of her body showed that her condition was not very good. Miss G. The doctor looked at her registration book and then at her name. He tried his best to comfort her. You're safe now. This is the hospital. We're going to help you deal with your wounds. The blood on your head is about to scab. If you don't deal with it, bacteria will grow in the wound. I hope you can. Jinwan seemed not to hear him. As the doctor approached, she abruptly curled up her legs, hugged her knees with her arms, and buried her face in her knees, motionless. The doctor was about to take advantage of her silence to help her over, but Jinwan suddenly raised her head and looked at them warily with red eyes. It was as though she would bite off the wrist of anyone who dared to touch her. Like a wounded little beast, she licked her wounds and did not allow anyone to approach. The doctor had no choice. Not to mention examining her, they couldn't even approach her to touch her. Although her clothes were only slightly torn, her inner clothes were still there. Her pants and all the important parts of her body were not touched, and she did not suffer any irreparable damage. Jinwan seemed to have suffered more than this simple stimulation. In her heart, there seemed to be a huge black hole that had been dug out today. There were countless scars in it. She was afraid of exposing them, but she could not hide them in her heart. Chapter 202. Seeing him come in, the medical staff all turned to look at the man with a strong aura. Mo Jingshan was still dressed in the same clothes. His shirt was stained with some blood from Jinwan's head, but he did not look disheveled. Seeing this cold and tall man with a cold and solemn expression on his handsome face, all the medical staff in the consultation room were afraid of his clear and cold gaze. After all, he had sent her in for more than 10 minutes, but no one had been able to treat Miss G's wound. Sir, Miss G doesn't want us to touch her. One of the doctors spoke up. Her emotions are unstable. We're afraid that if we forcefully touch her, it will add too much burden and agitation to her heart. You see, Mo Jingshan looked at Jinwan, who was surrounded by several people, pursed his thin lips coldly, took long steps and went straight over. When he approached, Jinwan was still curled up there helplessly and did not even raise her head. He had never seen Jinwan like this. The Jinwan he saw was cheerful and bright. Although her personality had changed a few months ago, she was still the same as before. It was just that she was more rational and had more goals in life. She was still as confident and bright as ever. He had never seen her so pale, and her eyes were filled with fear, as if she was on guard against the entire world. She even curled up there, her body trembling non-stop. She didn't dare to look at anyone. She put her hand by her mouth and bit her finger hard. It was as if there was something that she couldn't bear and was constantly disturbing her rationality. Mo Jingshan bent down, carried her from the corner of the wall by the bed, stroked her back and said softly, "You are injured. You need to see a doctor. Be good. We'll go back after treating your wound." Hearing Mo Jingshan's voice, Jinwan slowly raised her head. She could not hide the frightened expression on her face. However, because she saw that the man beside her was Mo Jingshan, although she did not resist his touch, her eyes were still full of wariness. Seeing that she had become obedient, the doctor wanted to take the opportunity while she was being held by this man to clean the blood on her head with alcohol cotton. However, before he touched her, he heard the woman's low and cold voice. "Don't touch me, doctor." Sure enough, other than this gentleman, she really did not allow anyone to touch her. How much stimulation must one have gone through, and how much trust and reliance must one have on this gentleman to make him the only one who was special? Seeing that she was really afraid of other people's touch, he stroked her head and asked softly, "Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" She shook her head. "Does your head hurt?" he asked in a low voice. She still shook her head, but winced at the pain when his hand touched the wound on her head. Mo Jingshan didn't say more. He signaled the doctor with his eyes to place everything that could be used to treat the wound on the shelf by his hand. He then personally wiped the blood from her forehead and cheeks, and then wiped the area around her wound. Seeing that her wound was not very deep and was only a scratch caused by the cobblestone wall and did not need to be stitched up, he took the alcohol cotton and continued to wipe her wound. Although the wound was not deep, it was not small. Jinwan's entire body trembled from the piercing pain from the alcohol cotton. However, when Mo Jingshan lowered his eyes to look at her with concern, she bit her lips hard and did not make a sound. She endured the pain and did not move. "Don't bite yourself." Mo Jingshan took a clean piece of gauze, folded it into a thick square and placed it by her mouth. When Jinwan bit the gauze, he continued to disinfect her wound. During this time, Jinwan did not make a single sound of pain. However, her increasingly pale complexion revealed how much pain she was in. Finally, Mo Jingshan put the gauze on her wound and stroked her hair that was stained with blood and sweat. He used a rubber band borrowed from the female doctor to tie her hair to the back of her head and asked for an ice pack to apply on the swollen side of her face. After doing all this, Jinwan leaned against his chest and did not speak. She still did not allow anyone to touch her and was not allowed to do any checkups. He repeatedly asked if she was feeling uncomfortable. After confirming that there were no other problems, Mo Jingshan brought her out of the hospital. After returning to the condo, Jinwan quickly fell asleep. However, nightmares kept coming and she would wake up every 5 minutes. Even though Mo Jingshan had been holding her to sleep, she would still wake up frequently. Each time she woke up, she would stare at the lights in the room for a long time, as though trying to ascertain where she was. Only when she gradually calmed down and was certain that she was safe did she close her eyes again. Not long after, she would wake up again. This repeated until the wee hours of the morning. Only then did she sleep a little longer. However, in her dreams, her hands were still tightly gripping onto Mo Jingshan's sleeves, as though she was afraid that he would leave and leave her alone. In the wee hours of the morning, everything was silent. Mo Jingshan's phone vibrated by the bedside. He glanced at Jinwan, who had slept peacefully for more than half an hour in his arms. He reached for the phone, glanced at it and picked it up. The other party clearly did not expect him to pick up the call. After so long, he had been ignored countless times. However, this time he actually picked up. "Jingshan." A clear and pleasant female voice came from the other end of the phone. "I'm very sorry about Shui's matter. She is... After that delivery incident, I warned you not to touch Jinwan. Did you ignore my words?" The man's voice carried a chill that could penetrate one's heart. The icy temperature seemed to have pulled down the temperature in the room. The woman on the other end of the phone was about to speak when she heard him coldly say, "Regardless of whether it's you or anyone else in the Su family, since I've already given up on the last bit of tolerance I have for you from today onwards, you will know the consequences of provoking me." The other party did not have time to say another word before the call was coldly hung up. Mo Jingshan tossed the phone onto the table. He turned to see that Jinwan had begun to furrow her brows in her sleep. Her uneasy hands were tightly gripping onto his sleeves, as though she was being chased by a frightening person in her dreams. It was as though she had nowhere to run, and her entire body was tense as she slept by his side. The man's hand avoided the wound on her head and rubbed it gently. After several minutes of comfort, Jinwan's body gradually relaxed. Her face was pressed against his chest, and her brows slowly unfurled. If it was only the incident in the bar's basement that had agitated her, it would be normal for her to feel uneasy. However, from her various actions, it was clear that the agitation she had received was not that simple. Chapter 203. Jinwan woke up from a dream. The moment she opened her eyes, the room was filled with darkness. She rushed to touch her side. It was not a familiar environment, but it was not unfamiliar either. The moment her hand touched the bedside lamp, the lights in the room abruptly turned on. At the same time, the curtains were slowly pulled open and sunlight shone in. The darkness in the room was replaced by a warm light. After seeing everything in the room clearly, she slowly released a sigh of relief. This was her apartment outside of T University. It was not the basement of the bar, nor was it the barren mountain village in her previous life where she could not even find a way out. She raised her hand to press against her head, recalling everything that happened last night. She was not sure if it was a dream or not, but the moment her hand touched the wound on her forehead, she immediately hissed in pain. The scene in the bar's basement filled her mind and her eyes panicked. At this moment, the bedroom door was opened, and she subconsciously raised her head. Mo Jingshan's tall figure stepped into the warm light of the bedroom. Jin Wan's tense emotions immediately relaxed. She released the hand that was tightly gripping the blanket. I thought you were in High City? I can't go back for your birthday, but I have to come over. Mo Jingshan's gaze was clear, as though everything that happened in the bar's basement last night had already passed. He did not continue to agitate her. The man sat down by her bedside. Jin Wan instinctively raised her hand to hug his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. She breathed in the clear fragrance of his body, closed her eyes and softly said, "Thank you." To Mo Jingshan these two words were meaningless. In fact, they should not have come from her mouth. But to Jin Wan these two words were the most important. Thank him for bringing her back from the hands of those vicious people who preyed on the weak. Thank him for preventing her from experiencing those terrifying and helpless experiences again. Mo Jingshan rubbed her head. What silly words are you saying? Does your head hurt? Jin Wan raised her hand to touch her head, but before her hand could touch the bandage, he held her wrist. Although it's only a superficial wound, it's not small. Don't touch it carelessly. Jin Wan raised her eyes to see that Mo Jingshan's arm was still wrapped around her. She could tell that he did not sleep last night and spent the entire night taking care of her. She was extremely glad that she had escaped last night and had not been defiled. Otherwise she would not know how to face this man now. But when she thought about how her body had been touched a few times last night, even if it wasn't an important part, it still made her feel uncomfortable. Did I not shower after I came back from the hospital last night? She only remembered that she fell asleep as soon as she returned. She had nightmares and did not have a clear impression of what happened last night. However, it was definitely a mess. Otherwise, Mo Jingshan would not have stayed up all night to take care of her. After you fell asleep, I helped you wipe off the bloodstains on your body. As he spoke, Mo Jingshan helped her tie up her hair. The man was clearly not familiar with combing a woman's hair. No matter how skilled Mo Jingshan was, there were times when he could not handle it. It took him a lot of effort to tie her long hair behind her head. After tying up her loose hair, he patiently said, "It's all in the past. Don't think too much. Go take a bath and relax. Don't touch water here." He gestured with his eyes to the wound on her forehead. Jin Wan nodded. Seeing that she had adjusted her emotions well, Mo Jingshan directly went to the bathroom to prepare the water for her. By the time Jin Wan entered the bathroom, it was already warm and steamy. She changed out of her soft and thin clothes and sat in the bathtub. She immersed her body in the warmth and felt as though she had finally found a warm and steady feeling. All of her thoughts, along with the slight pain from the wound on her head, slowly tugged at her nerves. She could finally calm her heart and carefully recall everything that had happened yesterday. She could not recall what happened in the bar's basement. Whenever she thought about it, she would still feel a lingering fear. If it were any other woman, they would not be able to let go of such a thing so easily. She could only rejoice that things did not go to the worst step. The cause of this matter was Su Shui. Since he clearly knew her identity and background, he still tried to approach her. His goal was most likely not as simple as making her lower her guard and asking someone to kidnap her. His true goal should be to gain a deeper understanding of her. Was this Su Shui related to Mo Jingshan? Su Shui was around 19 years old and not yet 20 years old. Thinking about the years when Mo Jingshan was in America, she should only be 14 or 15 years old. There shouldn't be any emotional ties between them. However, Jin Wan could not be completely sure. After all, Su Shui came from Los Angeles and clearly hated and disliked Jin Wan's identity as Mrs. Mo. So, who exactly was this person? Did she deliberately use such a method to ruin her? She was so young, yet her methods were so ruthless. Even if she was the daughter of Los Angeles' Swan Group, she would not be so vicious and merciless. The power behind Su Shui could not be underestimated. A 19-year-old girl was so familiar with these underground bar transactions and certain shady businesses. Even her actions were so ruthless and accurate. It must be related to the power behind her and her living environment. America, Los Angeles, the person behind Su Shui, perhaps this was everything related to Mo Jingshan. Jin Wan took a long shower when she suddenly heard movements outside. She got up, changed her clothes and walked out of the bathroom. She saw Feng Ling standing by the door of the condo. She seemed to have just arrived. They've all been taken care of. Everyone who attacked Mrs. Mo in the bar last night, as well as their accomplices, have all been arrested. Not a single one escaped. Feng Ling was reporting the situation outside to Mo Jingshan. She turned to see Jin Wan coming out of the bathroom and suddenly took out a check from her pocket. Mrs. M.O., is this the check you signed? Jinwan was surprised to see this check. She stared at it for a moment and nodded. It's the two people who drugged me and kidnapped me. In order to save my life, I had no choice but to sign a check for 5 million yuan. But perhaps the knife she had exchanged for 5 million at that time wasn't useless. At the very least, she had gone through a not-so-smooth escape in the middle, and it had more or less delayed her for more than half an hour. That's right. Feng Ling placed the check on the coffee table and said, the two of them wanted to exchange the check and escape from T-City overnight. However, they were discovered by our people. They were captured at the bank and this check fell into my hands. Jinwan stepped forward to take the check. Looking at the words on it, she directly tore it up and threw the shredded paper into the wastebasket by the side. Chapter 204. With Mr. M.O. personally making an appearance, the T-City police did not dare to be negligent. Those who should have been arrested were all caught, and those who should have been dealt with did not live to see the sun rise today. Hearing this, Jinwan subconsciously glanced at Feng Ling. Although Feng Ling did not say much, her meaning was clear. The person who almost tainted her last night was most likely dead. Did I kill him? When Jinwan asked this, her tone was calmer than she had imagined. After all, she remembered how many times she had stabbed that person last night. No, the wounds you stabbed him yesterday were not fatal. At most, he lost too much blood. The real cause of death was because he resisted too much when he was being arrested, causing the police to accidentally injure him. Feng Ling mildly curved her lips at Jinwan, indicating for her not to think too much. How could a person who was already half dead have the strength to resist in front of the police? However, even if Jinwan had the answer in her heart, she did not say much. Some people deserve to die. Since things had already reached this stage, she did not have the heart to feel pity for the state of the universe. Feng Ling used this method to stop her from thinking too much, and Jinwan accepted this ending. It was better than letting her know that the disgusting person was still alive and making her unable to eat every day. Seeing that Jinwan did not say more, Mo Jingshan sat on the sofa and indicated for her to come over. Does your head still hurt? As she approached, the man's hand touched her head. Although he avoided her wound, he purposely touched other parts of her head, as though to make sure she did not have any other injuries. It doesn't hurt. Last night, when I was struggling, I was thrown against the wall and hit my head. Jinwan pulled his hand down from her head and said, I know you're afraid I'll have a concussion. Last night, I did feel a little dizzy, but I'm much better now. Don't worry about me, I'm really fine. She had already calmed down and needed to think about many things. Recently, no matter if it was her injuries or the various situations, they all seemed to be related to someone in Los Angeles. When Jinwan's hand was held by Mo Jingshan, she suddenly asked, that Su Shui, what exactly is her background? Is her goal to destroy me? Or does she have other plans? Knowing that Mo Jingshan was by her side, Jinwan turned her eyes to Feng Ling and stared into her eyes. I sent her photo to you before the accident. Have you checked it? Any results? Feng Ling's expression faltered. Her gaze paused on Jinwan's face for a moment. She was about to speak when she suddenly felt Mo Jingshan's grip on her hand tighten. There's nothing for you to do here. Go out first, Mo Jingshan calmly said. His words were directed at Feng Ling. Seeing Feng Ling turn to leave, Jinwan subconsciously tried to withdraw her hand from Mo Jingshan's, only to be held tightly by him. What do you want to ask? He looked at her, his eyes clear and calm. Jinwan looked at him and suddenly felt a strong urge to pull her hand out of his, but Mo Jingshan didn't let go and looked at her fixedly. Let go of me first. She frowned and tried to pull her hand out of his palm several times. I won't. Jinwan was exasperated. She wanted to be angry, but it wasn't the right time. She could only grit her teeth and ask, is Su Shui the fiancé you had in America? Mo Jingshan stared at the woman who was sitting on the sofa with him. Her slightly pale face was clearly suppressing her emotions. There was even a piece of gauze stuck on the wound on her forehead. Under the light from the window, she appeared frail and weak, but she still had the stubbornness of trying to maintain her rationality. No, he answered. No. Jinwan's expression was surprised. Then why did she target me? Could it be that everything that happened before and after was just a coincidence? Su Shui came from Los Angeles. There shouldn't be any mistake about this. If she isn't your fiancé, who else could she be? It can't be that a woman who appeared out of nowhere is a lunatic who finds me an eyesore and wants to harm me, right? She must have a motive for everything she did. After being reborn, Jinwan was too good at enduring. After enduring for so long, she really couldn't take it anymore. After what happened last night, who could endure it? She stared at the handsome face in front of her and closed her eyes. She took a deep breath and tried to pull her hand out again, but she still failed. I don't have a so-called fiancé. At least for now, I only have you. Mrs. Imo Jingshin didn't allow her to pull her hand away. Just like that, they held hands and looked into her eyes. Things in America can't be explained in a few words, but you have to believe that from the beginning to the end, I only have you, Jinwan, as my woman. Although my past can't be considered a blank piece of paper, no woman has ever left a mark on it that shouldn't have. I'm your husband. I am now, will be, and will always be. Jinwan's expression still didn't soften. I'm not a domineering and unreasonable woman. I don't even care about your past and your past. I'm very realistic, so I only look at the present and what's in front of me. But the person who I've always ignored and didn't even consider deeply has challenged my bottom line again and again. She keeps trying to find a sense of existence in me. I can't tolerate it. I know. Imo Jingshin held her hand. I'll deal with it. How to deal with it? Up until now, she didn't even know who the person hiding in the dark was. Jinwan took a deep breath, suppressed her emotions and said coldly in a low voice, I have a headache. I'm going back to my room to sleep. With that, she suddenly stood up from the sofa and forcefully pulled her hand out of his grasp. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the direction of the bedroom without looking back. Imo Jingshin could see that she was really angry. She was just restraining herself and did not explode. However, it was clear that she wanted to be alone and did not want to talk to him. She did not want to talk to him at all. Jinwan directly entered the bedroom and slammed the door shut with a peng sound. She recalled the blood-stained wedding dress doll from last time and the thrilling events from last night. She wished she could dig 3 feet into the ground to find the woman hiding in the dark. Did she want to steal my man? Come on, if you have the ability, just fight me face to face. What's the purpose of hiding in the back and messing around? To drive a wedge between us? Or to make her restless? To do these things again and again to challenge her bottom line? Did he think she would be afraid? She knew she should be more rational now. She couldn't push Imo Jingshin away at this time. Otherwise, as Xia Tian had warned her, this piece of meat would be taken away without her knowing. But right now she was really angry. Chapter 205. Not long after, there was a knock on the door. Jinwan did not reply. She sat on the bed, holding her breath as she thought to herself. Forget it, forget it. This piece of meat was covered in gold. It was too precious and hard to guard. Whoever wanted to take it away could do so. She didn't want it anymore, all right? The door was knocked several more times. After a few seconds of silence, the man's calm voice rang out. Nwan. Jinwan laid on the bed, covering her face with the blanket. She was unwilling to hear his voice. Imo Jingshin knew that she had locked the door from the inside. His hand futilely twisted the doorknob. He softly said, Nwan, open the door. Jinwan did not make a sound. She buried herself in the blanket and used a silent method to respond. This woman's temper came as she pleased. There was no way Imo Jingshin would allow her to lock herself in the room like this. His tone became much harsher. Jinwan, open the door. Hearing his heavy tone, Jinwan abruptly sat up from the bed. She resisted the urge to throw the pillow against the door. I'm not opening it. My head hurts. I want to be alone. If you have a headache, go to the hospital. Why did you lock yourself up? Open the door. The man's voice was low and heavy. His tone was clearly colder. I'm not opening it. I'm not going anywhere. I want to sleep. Jinwan. Imo Jingshin, I don't want to talk to you right now. Do you want to open the door yourself or do I have to open it? Jinwan remembered that last night in the bar's basement, he had kicked open the sturdy door. He had many ways to open the door. She was indeed unable to stop him. She hugged the blanket and laid on the bed unmoving. She decided not to speak. Let him do as he pleased. After all, he was the one who bought this condominium. If he wanted to kick it, he could. After a moment of silence, Jinwan suddenly remembered that since he was the one who bought this condominium, he most likely had the keys to every room in this condominium. Thinking of this, she abruptly sat up and ran off the bed. She rummaged through the table and drawers by the bed and finally found the bedroom key in the drawer at the bottom of the bedside table. Seeing that the key was not in his hands, Jinwan finally relaxed. She placed the key back into the drawer and returned to the bed to continue covering herself with the blanket. Originally, she was just acting in a fit of pique, but after a while she fell asleep under the quilt. When she woke up again, it was already evening. The sunset hung in the distant sky, and the room was a little dark. She got up and glanced at the door that was still closed. Mo Jingshan actually did not come in. Moreover, there was no sound outside at all. Did he go out? Or did he simply fly back to High City out of anger after being ignored by her? She slept for a few hours, and in these few hours, anything was possible. Jinwan sat on the bed for a while and listened carefully for any movements outside. There really was no sound. She abruptly lifted the covers and got off the bed. She walked to the door and pressed her ear against it to listen again. The entire apartment was so quiet that it was as if she was the only one there. Jinwan opened the locked bedroom door. She slowly opened a gap and saw something on the ground in front of the door. She paused and couldn't see clearly, so she opened the door further. Just at the moment when the bedroom door was completely opened, as if everything had its own switch, the dim room in the evening suddenly lit up, especially the light in the living room, which set off the roses on the floor, particularly eye-catching. A large area in the middle of the living room was filled with roses, and the heart-shaped flower path in the middle was even more unique. Even in this heart-shaped flower path, there were even 21 cakes. The first cake was white, representing the pure white and flawless angel when she was 1 year old. Then the color of the cakes gradually deepened, from white to pink to red, until the last, the 21st cake, was red, representing marriage. Jinwan stood stiffly in front of the door, so busy throwing a tantrum that she even forgot that today was her birthday. Moreover, it had been too long since she had a birthday, and this kind of birthday atmosphere was particularly strange to her. The whole room could only see the rose path and the huge heart-shaped cakes. She raised her eyes and looked around but did not see Mo Jingshan. She walked out of the door. As soon as she passed the first white cake, she suddenly saw a burst of bright fireworks in the sky outside the window. Jinwan stared blankly out of the window and took another step forward uncontrollably. When she passed the second cake, there was another burst of fireworks outside the window. She looked out of the window as she walked until the last cake. Because it was heart-shaped, she walked back to the starting point at the bottom of the heart-shaped cake. As soon as she stepped on the last red cake, there were no more fireworks outside the window. Instead, on the balcony outside the French windows, a light slowly lit up. A man in a white shirt stood there. There was a fire in his hands and fireworks that had not yet been set off by his feet. Jinwan was stunned, subconsciously rushed over and opened the French windows. "Looking for me?" Mo Jingshan glanced at her with a calm smile, and the torch in his hand lit the unlit fireworks. Even when the bright and beautiful fireworks exploded in front of her, Jinwan was still looking at the man standing in the fireworks. She stood there, unmoving. It was as though the entire tea city was about to be shaken by this sudden rain of fireworks. Meanwhile, the person whose birthday was actually being celebrated stood there like a fool, staring blankly. She did not even know when Mo Jingshan walked over. She only knew that the man held her hand and planted a light kiss on it, saying softly, "1-year-old Jinwan, happy birthday." Before Jinwan could react, the man had already hugged her and planted a kiss on her forehead. 2-year-old Jinwan, happy birthday. Jinwan, 3-year-old Jinwan, happy birthday. 4-year-old Jinwan, happy birthday. He kissed her hands, her face, her nose, the space between her eyebrows, her forehead, her ears, her cheeks, and so on. 20-year-old Jinwan, happy birthday. When she was about to say 21 years old, the man finally planted a kiss on her lips. He did not move away but pressed his lips against hers, saying softly, 21-year-old Mrs. Mo, happy birthday. With that, he abruptly pushed Jinwan, who was still absent-minded, against the glass of the floor-to-ceiling window. This kiss was not as light as the previous ones. Instead, it seemed to be full of possessiveness and aggression, imprisoning her firmly between the window and his chest. The kiss became deeper and deeper. When Jinwan came back to herself, she raised her hand to block his chest, but he held her back and his tongue, which had already invaded her body, drilled deeper into her body. Jinwan could not push him away. She opened her eyes and abruptly bit down on his lips. Although it was not a heavy bite, the man paused and lowered his eyes to look at her. Jinwan wanted to say that she was still angry, but she could not say it. Chapter 206. However, the man in front of her stared at her. His deep, black eyes were filled with traces of a smile. His smile was seductive, as though he was a pervert who brought disaster to the world. His Adam's apple bobbed, and he leaned down to press his lips against hers. There was no further entanglement. Instead, he licked her lips inch by inch, filling the air with ambiguity. Finally releasing her lips, he held her waist, preventing her from turning her head away. He said in a low and hoarse voice, "Even if I'm angry, my birthday still has to be celebrated. If I don't give you a proper explanation before midnight, won't I have another baseless accusation?" Jinwan looked at his innocent appearance and pushed him angrily. "I'm not that unreasonable." "That's right. You're very reasonable. Yesterday you acted as a hero saving a damsel in distress. Today you dare to lock me outside the door and? That's because you weren't honest with me." Jinwan forcefully slapped his hand away from her face. Although she was clearly moved, she still had to hold back her anger. Right now, her expression was indescribable. It was likely that it was slightly twisted, but she could not be bothered to hide it. However, she was no match for his strength. Jinwan had already been brought into the floor-to-ceiling window. The window was not closed. She tried to push his hand away, but the man placed a knife in her hand. "Jinwan, cut the cake or just cut me. Choose one." Mo Jingshin's tone was mild, but his gaze was indifferent as he watched her. It was clear that he had already seen through her thoughts. "Aren't you still angry? Where do you want to cut?" He leaned over, leaning in front of her face to look at her expression. "The door is already closed and you've held back your anger for too long. Rather than having a cold war by yourself, why don't you cut me a few times? I saw that you cut me very cleanly last night. Do you want to continue venting your anger today?" Jinwan gripped the knife tightly, glaring at him. The feeling of punching cotton was truly an internal injury. "Who says I want to have a cold war with you? I'm not that bored." Jinwan abruptly turned around, picked up a cake on the ground and cut it. She then picked up the cake and put it on the table by the side. After cutting it several times, she picked up another one and continued to cut it. From beginning to end, she did not look up at her again. Mo Jingshin stood by the side watching her. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that she was using the same strength she used to cut him to cut the cake. The peng-peng sounds indicated that she was indeed in a bad mood. He didn't say anything and handed her the cake for her to cut. After cutting one, he passed her another. After cutting for a long time, Jinwan was tired. She turned to see that there were still a few intact ones on the ground. Mo Jingshin picked up another one and handed it to her. She stood there with the knife covered in cream in her hand. The man looked at her with clear eyes, and his eyes were filled with the indulgence that belonged to her. For a moment, Jinwan didn't know what she was angry about. He had clearly explained to her that even if his past couldn't be considered a blank piece of paper, no woman had ever left a mark on it that shouldn't have. His words were already clear enough. What else did she want him to say? Jinwan didn't know why she was so angry with him. Was it because his past in Los Angeles had been provoking her? Did this mean that the other party had succeeded in provoking her? She suddenly rubbed between her brows. She didn't think whether her jealousy was really unreasonable. She threw the knife away and went to the bathroom to wash her hands, washing away the cream on her hands. At this moment, the doorbell rang. Jinwan slowly washed her hands and saw Mo Jingshin open the door. Nanheng came in. Seeing the mess on the floor and Mo Jingshin's white shirt more or less stained with cream, he sneered coldly. "Did you guys just go through a cream war? Or did you just unlock some new postures on so many cakes?" Jinwan didn't have time to think about why Nanheng suddenly came to T-City. His words made her ears burn. Mo Jingshin calmly glanced at Nanheng and then at Jinwan, who was still standing in the bathroom washing her hands. He spoke, his voice gentle and ordinary. "Your body is covered in cream. Go back to the bedroom and change your clothes after washing." Nanheng looked at the gauze on Jinwan's head and the slightly swollen side of her face. His gaze was no longer as ordinary. "You were so heavy-handed. Didn't you crush that bastard's family jewels on the spot?" Nanheng sneered, but his expression was clearly much colder. Jinwan paused and calmly glanced at him. Could it be that Nanheng was here because of the underground bar incident? Or was it related to that person in America? Before I could make a move, that person was already crippled by Feng Ling. Mo Jingshin's extremely cold voice interrupted Jinwan's thoughts. He looked at her. "Go back to the room and change your clothes." That person was not only crippled by Feng Ling, but Jinwan also almost killed him with her own hands. Wasn't that even more bloody? Jinwan knew that Nanheng was in the arms business, and she also knew that his relationship with both the underworld and the underworld was not simple. The reason why Nanheng came here was most likely because the people who were dealt with last night were all from T-City's underground bar. Perhaps there was some connection between them. Jinwan did not wish to hear any more about those people from last night. She glanced at them, wiped her hands and went back to the bedroom. Seeing Jinwan step into the bedroom with the cake and mess on the floor, Nanheng felt that Jinwan seemed to be angry today. Although she didn't say it, when she closed the bedroom door, she made a loud noise. Nanheng raised his brows, looking at Mo Jingshan with an indifferent expression. What's the matter? Did you manage to save her and release her temper? Mo Jingshan ignored him. He casually unbuttoned his shirt and calmly asked, What happened in Los Angeles? What happened? Isn't it obvious? Because of your pressure, Elder Su locked his precious granddaughter up at home. Su Shui was merely used by that person. She dared to come to the country to cause trouble. She is indeed courageous. But it's not like you don't know what kind of power the Su family is relying on. Nanheng spread his hands. But speaking of which, are you really willing to do it? That person guarded you for an entire year while you were still recovering from your injuries. There seemed to be an undercurrent surging in the air. Mo Jingshan's usually gentle face revealed a biting sharpness. His tone was cold and heavy. If it wasn't for my father's interference back then, taking advantage of the time when I was unconscious to plant such a person by my side, I wouldn't have mistaken her for my savior. Otherwise, why do you think she had the opportunity to guard me for an entire year? That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.